Chapter 4883. Yinxian is Yinxian, and Dianxian is Dianxian. The gap between the two is too vast. Even if the quasi-Dian immortal understands the immortal style, it is almost impossible to fight the Dian immortal. Therefore, Chang Duoling couldn't believe it. The corner of his eyes throbbed, and his eyes were cold. That's a pity. Today I will never let you leave alive. Jian Wushuang's mouth slowly conjured up a sneer. The first time I can threaten you. The second time it is more than just a threat. Chang Duoling sneered equally. And his figure suddenly disappeared into countless plumes of smoke and dust the next moment. Standing on the spot, Jian Wushuang instantly condensed an invisible sword blocking him. Boom! With a muffled sound, the sword in his hand shattered directly, and his figure retreated 100 feet. Qi and blood surged. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, restraining the blood that was about to gush out. This understatement hit him severely. Chang Duoling, who was promoted to rank 3, was completely different from the previous one. Whether it was the control of Yanli, or the use of the immortal style, he rose to another level. He already had the mentality of killing, and his shots were also fierce several times. He stretched out his hand, and a star halberd condensed from the stars fell into his hand. This is the real battle. The endless void was torn apart, and all Yangxians sighed. Xiao Dijuan also woke up leisurely, unable to condense the fairy source, but survived by this. Instead of pale, his face was covered with sickly blush. Supported by the thin purple robe, he watched the battle intently. This is an extremely unequal realm, but it has fallen into a fierce battle. Chang Duoling held a halberd with flowing stars, and with every attack, Jian Wushuang kept retreating. Originally, I regarded Jian Xiu as a joke, and the number of Jian Xiu cultivators who died in my hands is definitely no less than 50. They are nothing more than mobs, but now you have changed my opinion. If you are alive, you will definitely be able to ascend to the Sword Immortal, or start a sect, or take charge of 100 heavens. It is all easy. But if you are alive, I will not be able to return to life, and I will never allow it. Chang Duoling's voice was cold and his eyes were sharp. So, you must die in my hands. After he finished speaking these last words, the star halberd in his hand suddenly slashed down, as if he was crushing down with the endless stars. The invisible long sword shattered at the sound. Jian Wushuang's chest was torn, and a long and narrow bloodstain appeared. Then Chang Duo made the star halberd in his hand suddenly deformed, turning it into a soft whip, and directly bound him. Goodbye. He smiled weirdly, with his palms pointed like a knife, carrying endless power, and directly cut off Jian Wushuang's right arm with one palm. Divine blood spilled into the void. Not good. With a startled cry, Chen Qiu was about to rush forward, but was stopped by Di Qing. Di Qing looked at him and said in a condensed voice, "Even Jian Wushuang can't handle it. Even if you are all on it, it's just a dead end." Chen Qiu understands naturally, but if he doesn't save Jian Wushuang, he will be wiped out. Thinking of this, he seemed to have caught the last straw, and looked towards Deqingdo. Here, only you can save Brother Jian. As the 9 ranks Dian Immortal, Di Qing is in the absolute realm. He has grown to the 9 ranks realm since ancient times. He has reached the highest level of growth strength, and can naturally be easily crushed, but just promoted to the 3rd rank. Chang Duoling. But all of this must be established before he lost his life. He has lost his 2 true lives, and the battle with Chang Fu has made him weak so far. But even so, he can still save Jian Wushuang from Chang Duoling's hands. It's just that he doesn't plan to save Jian Wushuang now. He can feel that Jian Wushuang needs such a battle that is not equal at all. I will shoot when necessary but not now. Di Qing said. I have a hunch that this will never be his limit. But Chen Qiu still didn't say anything in the end, looking solemnly at the void. At this moment, the void seemed to be soaked with blood, and Jian Wushuang was tortured. Every inch of his fairy body was crushed into powder by Chang Duoling mercilessly. Let me guess where your Xianyuan is, heart? Head. Chang Duoling sneered. The immortal body where he passed by his palm became a powder. Jian Wushuang could not move. He could only let him disassemble the fairy body. The pain of bone and heartbreak made his temples sweat like syrup. But even so, he didn't say a word. and looked at Chang Duoling coldly. Chang Duo makes him look at him and feels even more embarrassed. He dislikes this extremely calm gaze. He is already a dying person, and being so calm is simply against common sense. This look seemed to be with disdain and contempt, which made him rejuvenate his killing intent, and directly blasted out Jian Wushuang's belly with a punch. It is unfortunate that you met me. If there is reincarnation, remember to converge. Chang Duoling said coldly, raising his arm, and the back cover came down. Thousands of stars died at the same time, and the general momentum emanating directly shattered Jian Wushuang's entire fairy body. The stream of light faded away, and finally escaped completely in the air. Seeing this scene, Yang Xiandu had heart palpitations, and such an unequal battle finally ended. After that, Diqing appeared to Chang Duoling. With an extremely pale complexion, he was still a step late. Damn chop, do you know the consequences? Diqing was furious, and 10 wings suddenly appeared behind him, revealing his unconcealed realm of strength. Rank 9 Dian Immortal, the endless coercion, like the 10,000 heavens falling down. The chill from the bottom of his heart made Chang Duo shocked. He knows very clearly what this level of coercion represents. That is an existence even more terrifying than him. At this moment, Diqing was completely furious. Regardless of the damage to his life, he slapped Chang Duoling with a palm. Although it has been prepared for a long time, Yu read www.Akanshu. However, facing such a blow, Chang Duoling was directly taken hundreds of feet away. Miscellaneous, prepare to die. Diqing walked forward slowly. The power of his body seemed to be burning, and the 10 wings behind him were beating in rhythm, exuding a powerful force. In the golden cage on the hibiscus tree in North Tianxianzhu, he slept for an unknown number of years. It seemed that he had not yet come out of the ancient battle, until the anxious face appeared in his eyes. The kid with a certain purpose seemed to have a path in front of him. Chapter 4884. Although Diqing was in between, ruining 2 true lives one after another, causing his cultivation base to plummet, he was still willing to continue like this. But all of this is not for now. The guy who was between calm and reckless perished. Everything seemed to return to dead silence. He shouldn't have died just like that. Even though he has been in the dead for several times, he was unharmed. But this time he will probably fall completely. The pain was enough to penetrate the pain of every drop of divine blood, making Jian Wushuang's divine consciousness extremely clear, even though the immortal body was completely destroyed. He was like a ray of soul floating in the broken void, able to see and hear everything that happened. From an ultra-perfect chaotic creature to an immortal body, Jian Wushuang didn't worry about his true fall. Because the immortal body is too bad for the sky. Even a mere obsession can be reborn in a short period of time. Even the emperor may not be able to completely destroy him. In addition, in the final battle with Chang Duoling, he swallowed a few pills in advance, which was enough for him to fully recover in a very short time without any weakness. But now, he was not in a hurry to restore the fairy body, but floated into the Bo Yang bottle scattered in the broken void. Jian Wushuang, whose fairy body was completely destroyed, felt an unprecedented sword intent. That kind of sword intent is the third form of the entire Xinghe Lake Haijian intent. Chang Duoling, who was slapped 100 feet away by Diqing, had a big humiliation flashing in his eyes, but he did not intend to fight back. Because the general momentum emanating from Diqing's whole body is really terrifying. At least it is rank 6 Dian Immortal. At this moment, he just thought about how to get out of his body. With 9 days of clothing and a mysterious body, Chang Duo made Tai, who hadn't acted, been too scared. He thought that if he wanted to leave, Diqing would never be able to keep it. Today you must die in my hands. No one can save you. Diqing was furious, and approached him step by step. The 10 wings behind his back were all rhythmic and stretched. At the same time, a huge black Wubao image came to the void. Chang Duoling gritted his teeth and stepped back. Just as he was about to flee desperately, a very familiar voice quietly sounded. A well-knotted palm was gently placed on Diqing's shoulder. If you work, leave it to me next. Diqing turned his head subconsciously, and saw a handsome and determined face. No, Wushuang. Jian Wushuang smiled. Hurry up and put away all the supernatural powers and restore them soon. As he said, he went beyond the truth and moved forward firmly. At this moment, all Yangtzeans were shocked, and none of them could believe that this guy who died so hard that he could no longer die would actually appear again. Including Chuanxiu, Chen Qing and others all stared at the figure's back sluggishly. Walking slowly to Chang Duoling, who was also dull-looking, Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly and said quietly, "Go ahead." "No, it's impossible. How could you still be alive? Haven't your Xianyuan been crushed by me?" Chang Duoling shook his head in disbelief. Jian Wushuang glanced at him. "What you see is not necessarily the final result. If you want to leave here alive, kill me." Recovering from the shock, he soon realized that Jian Wushuang must have used some treasure to seal the source of the immortal source before he was able to recover. Chang Duoling regained his composure, but he didn't plan to take action anymore. Once he was traumatized again, he might really be unable to take it off. But Jian Wushuang obviously didn't give him time to consider, and the invisible sword was condensed once again with a shake of his right hand. His gaze condensed, and he quickly said, "Why do you want to die? You can't even open my 9 heavens clothes profound. Don't do anything in vain. If you didn't work before, it doesn't mean the final result. Today you will never leave alive." Jian Wushuang's voice was cold, and the invisible sword in his hand pointed forward. In the next moment, the void suddenly fell silent, and the boundless sword intent rose from behind him. Uncountable sword intents converge one after another to form a magnificent rainbow peak. But this scene only existed for a moment, and then all returned to Jian Wushuang. Chang Duoling took a half step back involuntarily, and he felt unusual. If the previous Jian Wushuang was a true sword with all its sharp edges, then at this moment, he had completely condensed all aura. As if a true sword was in a box, hiding its edge, but it was full of an indescribable sense of unknown. Facing such an immortal Yanxian who had almost beheaded him, he did not dare to hold it big, and with a stroke of his hand, a star halberd appeared again. "I only need a sword." Jian Wushuang's voice was ethereal, and his eyes condensed with the supreme sword intent. The original introverted sword intent was all vented at this moment. Uncountable sword intents are like hundreds of thousands of tassels, rising and rushing in the void. They all seem to have some kind of consciousness, and they are quickly connected to each other, constantly building. The entire void was illuminated by the endless sword intent, as if millions of rounds of great sun lifted into the sky. Even Yanxian couldn't look directly at it at this moment. That is a heavenly gate, a magnificent heavenly gate that supports hundreds of millions of miles of void. It is constructed from countless sword intents, and it can no longer be described as a magnificent fairy trail. Jian Wushuang's clothes floated firmly, holding an invisible sword, stepping into the gate of the day. The next moment, the dust-covered Tianmen slowly opened, and countless swordsmanship pouring out, condensed into a quiet lake. And in that lake, there are clear springs gurgling, and the sun, moon and stars are born in it. Then an extremely pure and mighty huamang, like the brightest round of the sun, bloomed completely. Jian Wushuang let the sword with his hand, and came from Tianmen. His brilliance was so majestic that even the gate of heaven flowing through the lake of life was dim. That sword was unstoppable, as if its birth had been announced. It was an unstoppable sword that could only be endured. Even if the person facing him is an emperor, he cannot stop it. Boom! Chang Duoling's spiritual consciousness was blank. He had forgotten to resist. He just looked at that mighty sword idiotically, fell towards him. Such a sword style of Bona, but it also contains a blow to the extreme. No fairy can think of this sword. This sword has exceeded cognition. It shouldn't have appeared, it was not even a product of fantasy, but at this moment it was understood by Jian Wushuang. This sword is a sword that has pushed the entire Wuxia swordsmanship and Xingahouhai sword intent to an unimaginable height, and the ultimate sword. Even the current Jian Wuxia has already confirmed that even the last form of the sword intent of the C word will never break through. This sword is not even a product of fantasy, but in the end it was born strangely. Wuxia Kendo, Xingahouhai Jianini 3rd style. Lake. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4885. Everything is gone, even the void is gone. The void spread by unimaginable energy was too vast. With the 6-day realm as the center, nearly 40 spheres were destroyed at the same time. You know, this is the heaven in Dian Huan. Every heaven is infiltrated by the rules of heaven, and its sturdiness is enough to support the battle of Dian Immortal. But right now they are all destroyed. The entire 6-day realm was guarded by Di Qing's early release of Yanlian time. There are immortals who can't dodge, and they can't even make a sound. They are completely destroyed together under this sword. This sword is too majestic, can cut the sky, destroy the domain, and destroy the enemy, as if no fairy can stop this blow, not even the day fairy. The mighty lake-shaped sword intent lasted a long time. That day the gate was magnificent, and the lake flowing out of it was quiet and bone. Di Qing stared at that scene closely, and even he felt a complete heart palpitations. The infinite kendo that stretched like a river finally retreated, and the ruined void finally slowly revealed. Jian Wuxia stood on the spot, with countless sword intent lingering. No one dared to look directly. He held the sword with one hand, and his eyes were extremely indifferent. In front of him, Chang Duoling remained standing, his complexion a little pale. Me, I lost? How could it be possible? Jian Wuxia ignored him, slowly letting go and backing away. Chang Duoling looked down as if feeling something. I saw that in his heart. An invisible sword with sword intent pierced through his fairy body. The purest fairy source quickly dissipated. The 9 heavens Yishuan that he was proud of, the supreme treasure that could withstand the attack of Dian Immortal, also broke a hole in his heart under Jian Wuxia's sword. The prosperity of a sword destroys a third-turn Dian. The world is silent. Chang Duoling seemed to want to say something, but his Xianyuan was so broken that he couldn't speak. On the eve of the imminent fall, Chang Duoling made a move. He tried his best to throw the Jiutian Yixian on Jian Wuxia. Jian Wuxia stretched out his hand to take it, and looked at him calmly. Your sword is too great. It would be a pity if you die just like this. I want to see how far you can disrupt to see you. After saying these last words, Chang Duo let his life fall. It was like stars falling, and it quickly dissipated in the void, and there was no possibility of resurrection at all. Jian Wuxia still stood still on the spot, and after stuffing the 9-day clothes Xian into the Boyang bottle, a faint tiredness flashed in his eyes. The First World War wiped out the 3rd-ranked Dian Immortal. This is a scene that has never appeared in the past. He is like a lone sword fairy, standing in the void. Jian Wuxia slowly turned around, and at the same time he took a step forward. Divine blood spewed out from every inch of his skin. Then, he was like a touch of shock, falling straight into the endless void. The next moment, Xiao Dijuan and others all soared away, catching Jian Wuxia, who became a blood man together. Di Qing slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid breath, slowly turned around, and faced the 200 Yinxian left, suddenly bursting out 10 wings. One counts one, you all stay here. A belated slaughter began quietly. Under this final battle, more than 400 Yangxians who came to destroy the 6-day realm only escaped less than 20. The 3rd-ranked Dian Immortal Chang Duoling also completely died in this battle. In the hazy chaos, Jian Wuxia opened his eyes with difficulty. His brain is dizzy, as if he can't remember anything. In the chaos, he only heard an excited voice echoing in the hall. Big brother Jian is awake, brother Jian is awake. With the sound of rushing, Jian Wuxia only felt a lot of people coming around, and at the same time wisps of warm liquid dripped into his dry mouth. That kind of liquid contains extremely pure medicinal effects, rejuvenating the meridians as soon as you take it. After repeating this for a long time, Jian Wuxia barely opened his eyes completely. The one who caught your eye was Xiao Dijuan, and then Di Qing, Chun Qiu, Chun Qing and others surrounded him. Wake up, brother sword, your fairy body is really terrifying. After suffering such a heavy dark wound, you can wake up in such a short time. Chun Qing said in a loud voice, full of admiration. Just wake up. Little Emperor Jun nodded, and handed him the porcelain bowl in his hand. Jian Wushuang took a drink and drank it, then asked, How long did I sleep? Less than 10 years, said Di Qing, who folded his arms. I thought you would sleep for tens of millions of years. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists, and found that the immortal body was okay, then said, Fortunately, the injury is not too severe, and you can fully recover after a period of rest. Everyone looked at him like a monster. Being able to slay one of the most difficult Tier 3 Dian immortals with the power of immortal emergence, and even recover in such a short period of time, this simply cannot be guessed by common sense. Chun Qing came up again and said with excitement, Brother Jian, I'm afraid you are already a sword fairy now? I think I can't stop the sword 10 years ago. Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head slowly. No, I'm afraid there is still some distance from Jianxian. No way, can't you break through the sword fairy with such a powerful sword? It is so difficult. Chun Qing was a little shocked. The so-called sword immortal is an illusory level, and this level is not linked to Yanxian. So far, the only sword fairy recognized by Jian Wushuang is Ding Bai. He is the real master of kendo, just a marvelous sword. It amazed Jian Wushuang's cognition. If you want to become a sword immortal, I am afraid that the last sea character sword intent will appear, and the whole Xinghe Lake sea sword intent can be achieved. However, the current Jian Wushuang is confident that he can definitely resist Ding Bai, just by relying on that lake-shaped sword intent. After all, even himself was amazed by the sword intent of the lake character. Little Dijuan pondered a little, and said, Brother Jian, have you touched some great opportunities from Dian immortals? Jian Wushuang shook his head again. It's still the same as before, stopping at the peak of Yanxian. I am afraid it will take a long time to reach Dianxian. This is his truth. Even though he had realized the most outstanding sword in that trembling battle, and killed a third-ranked Dian immortal, there was still no opportunity to break through Dian immortal. It is as if the upward road is blocked. Jian Wushuang guessed that the reason why he didn't realize the opportunity to break through Dian immortal was probably related to his inability to condense the source of immortality. If the promotion to Dian immortal must have the most basic source of immortality, I am afraid he will not be able to go further. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4886. Although Jian Wushuang hadn't found the opportunity yet, he was not too worried. As early as in the Divine Power universe, he made the road to promotion difficult because of his own physique against the sky. At the beginning, it was a threshold to be promoted to the Supreme, but now I am afraid that it is also a threshold to be promoted to Dian Immortal, and it may even be hundreds of times more difficult than being promoted to the Supreme. From the super-perfect chaotic creature to the immortal physique of immortality, the promotion of realm is bound to be much more difficult than the ordinary evangelization. But fortunately, Jian Wushuang's strength in cross-border combat is still there. The battle with Jiutian Xianjun Chang dueling allowed Jian Wushuang to realize his strongest sword, and at the same time, let him know his current strength. Before the lake-shaped sword intent, he was strong enough to fight Dian Immortal in the initial realm. If the lake-shaped sword intent was used, Jian Wushuang would be able to kill the third-ranked Dian Immortal. In this big division, apart from the Wanggu elders around Jin Wuyang and Di Qing, who is the 9th rank, there will be few Yanxian who can threaten him. Nearly 10 years have passed since the battle with Chang dueling, and he has been in a coma for 10 years. But everything that happened seems to be yesterday, vividly visible. The 6-day realm was destroyed, and 2 heavens were destroyed. Although the foundation of the next 3 days was not destroyed, the power of the little emperor was severely damaged, and almost all of them were destroyed. There are only less than 10 immortals, and more than 9,000 top repairers. Looking at some of the superpowers in the Great Siyu, they are probably many times stronger than today's Zai Autogen. This is a war that has been conspired for a long time. 400 Yanxian and 1 Dianxian are so generous. I am afraid that the other emperors have conspired together. Come out with me, Xiaodajan said while looking at him, then turned and walked outside the hall. Jian Wushuang didn't say much, and after getting up from the bed he walked out. At this moment, outside this temporarily constructed hall, there were nearly 10,000 top repairmen standing. And when they saw Xiaodajan and Jian Wushuang, they immediately stood up and became nervous. Sword Heaven Official Dash. They all called out this official name spontaneously. Jian Wushuang waved his hand, and then walked into the dilapidated and desolate heaven. This used to be the site of Shao Gudian, and De Gudian is above our heads. Xiaodajan pointed to the top of his head and said, "Now they are all shattered. This is the first time I have suffered such severe damage since I took charge of the 6-day realm. If it weren't for Brother Jian, I am afraid that the entire 6 days have been completely destroyed." Destroyed? Jian Wushuang looked at him. "Do you know who did it? This time I can gather so many immortals. I'm afraid the power behind it will never be small." He nodded. "When you broke the formation, I found a familiar face among so many evangelists. It was one of the evangelists under the seat of Gongzi Jiao. But Gongzi Jiao experienced the previous great changes. It is absolutely impossible to gather more than 400 Yanxians in such a short time. So there are at least 2 emperors in the forces assembled this time." Jian Wushuang didn't speak, and he guessed who the 2 emperors were. Anyway, this time, the damage they suffered was not much lighter than mine. I damaged 2 domains. I had no more than 100 immortals, and no more than 100,000 immortals. Each of them lost at least 200 immortals. But even so, the fight will not stop here. It will only intensify. Little Emperor looked at Jian Wushuang and said softly, "Brother Jian, Shao Gudian was given to you by me at the beginning, and now I will return it to you again." With that, he fumbled out a radiant and green seed from his arms and handed it to Jian Wushuang's hands. It is the seed of the world tree. You only need to throw it in the void, and it will grow into a heaven. Then your big lonely sky. I still have a seed. Jian Wushuang didn't say much. He waved his hand, and threw the emerald green seed into the void. In an instant, the kind of child greeted the storm of the void, and in an instant it expanded to tens of thousands of miles away. The verdant green tree cover formed the sky, and the vigorous roots became the earth. Even the mysterious rules of heaven were born in it. From a seed, it turned into a vast universe. This is a miracle. Even Jian Wushuang was shocked by this scene. At this point, Shao Gudian was constructed. What made Jian Wushuang even more surprised was that the most primitive creatures bred in it, and the degree of fertility, was even several times higher than the previous Shao Gudian. "Brother Jian, Shao Gudian has been delivered to your hands again," Shao Dijuan said with a smile. Jian Wushuang shook his head slightly. "Just stay here for a while, this is still yours." A touch of sadness flashed in his eyes. The long wind blew slowly. "Brother Jian, how many years are there in the agreement between us? It seems to be less than 30 years, right?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly. "I don't remember clearly, let's take a step and take a look." Shao Dijuan raised his head and looked at him, then laughed for a while. "Brother Jian, thank you very much." "No thanks. If there is news about what I'm looking for, I'm afraid I will leave." "I know. But Brother Jian, you remember that no matter where you are in the future, what kind of crisis you will encounter in the future, the young master in this big division will always open the door for you." Shao Gudian was reshaped, and Shao Dijuan used the last seed of the world tree to reshape De Gudian. At this point, the 6-day realm was restored. It's just that the fallen immortal and Ding Xiao are close to 90%, and the remaining immortal and Ding Xiao are not enough to deal with the possible war that may occur next. "Brother Jian, I still want to ask you something." "What's the matter?" "That is, I would like to ask you to advise about the immortal evangelists and top repairers in the 6-day realm that can improve them a little bit." Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. "If it's about the growth of Yanli and the promotion of realm, I am afraid it will not work. Each Yanxian has its own way to go. If it is forcibly reversed, I am afraid it will be counterproductive. I know about this. What I think is, can Brother Jian give some pointers on their kendo sword intent? This is probably even worse. If it weren't for sword repair, the pay in return will be very disproportionate. Xiaodajin smiled. Brother Jian, don't worry. Chapter 4887. The control of the Tao and his unique insights allowed Jian Wushuang to condense it easily. If he likes books, he might be able to fill half of the Tiandao book pavilion. Jian Wushuang thought about Xiaodajin's invitation for a while and readily agreed. After a few months of rest, he set up a vast dojo in the extreme south of Shaogudian as a place for swordsmanship. In order to join in the excitement, Chen Qing, Chuanxiu, Cui Jing Zhaoting, Wei Liujia followed Jian Wushuang to the extreme south of Xiaogushan, and even Diqing followed with great interest. Come here, ready to listen together. It is said that there are more than 4,000 sword repairs, but in fact, nearly 10,000 top repairs were present, including the remaining 9 Yanxian, all of whom were present. To be sure, none of the remaining forces under the seat of the little emperor was absent, and all were present. Standing in the center of the dojo, watching the overwhelming and exciting top repairers, Jian Wushuang's mouth twitched. But this was not enough to make him stage fright. After a helpless sigh, he quickly entered the state. There are those who have cultivated their swords for 1 year. There are those who have been practicing swordsmanship in the 2 years. There are those who have been practicing sanhua. Until the end of the 4th Chinese year, Jian Wushuang waited for the result after finishing talking. Soon, Ding Xiu came out one after another, each standing in his own place. After dozens of breaths, there were almost 3,000 swordsmen who were divided into 3 camps, and the 3 Yanxian who majored in swordsmanship were all practicing swordsmanship for 3 years. This was not beyond Jian Wushuang's expectation. The path of Jian Wushuang was never orthodox. It was already a matter of great perseverance for them to persist in the practice of Jiando for 3 years. Even though there are thousands of supreme true swords in Dayanhuan, they are just media, releasing the media of Yanlixian style. Now who can tell me, what is kendo? Jian Wushuang looked at them and asked loudly. The sword repairmen all looked at each other, including the 3 Yanxian frowning and lost in thought. At this time, a sword repairman who was not too eye-catching, with a mediocre face, stepped forward slightly and said with a slightly nervous voice, "Sword is the way to upward." As soon as this statement came out, including the top repairers in the field, they all laughed. The Jian Xiu's complexion suddenly turned red, and he couldn't wait to shrink back. Seeing this in the outfield, Diqing directly released Yanli to maintain order and quiet the dojo. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. That's right, I also think kendo is an upward path. As soon as this remark came out, all sword repairers became agitated. No, it's that simple? How can such a complicated kendo be summed up in 2 sentences? After the Jian Xiu received Jian Wushuang's affirmation, he nodded vigorously, his complexion even more flushed. After hearing those whispers, Jian Wushuang continued, "Who defines kendo? Who can define it? It is a vain way, and it is not even as real as it is cultivated. What I want to say now is that no one can define kendo, because there are so many kendos, and every swordsman is just looking for an upward path in succession. At the same time, I can tell you clearly that kendo is lonely. Everyone can define it arbitrarily, even if you only do the simplest sword swing for a whole year. That is part of kendo. You don't have to refute others, and you don't have to refute yourself. Kendo is inherently impermanent. An upward path is sufficient to summarize it." All the top repairs in Jian Xiu have calmed down at this moment, listening to Jian Wushuang's theory, as if understanding or not. He said calmly, "Now whether you understand it or not, I will tell you what kendo means in my heart. The so-called kendo, when I want to use 8 words to describe it, is actually the best. The avenue is simple, and it evolves to complex. These 8 characters can summarize it. The original kendo must be the simplest. Even if it is a slash with a wooden stick, it may be the source of kendo. This is called Jane. After that, the first iron piece tempered from iron, or completed its first mission to kill the enemy. In fact, by simplifying the complicated process. After the birth of the sword, the so-called sword intent and kendo are complex. Of the whole pile of words I said above, there are only 8 words, plus one sentence is useful, so I won't repeat the rest. There are no more than 5 people who can understand this kind of more esoteric kendo on the spot, or even one person, but Jian Wushuang obviously didn't intend that they would all be able to understand. What he had to do now was to let them feel and comprehend their sword intent, and give them some insights like a duck. As for Di Qing and the others sitting on the periphery of the dojo, none of them spoke, all of them frowned, as if thinking and recollecting some truth. After briefly summarizing kendo, Jian Wushuang spoke again. I remembered another question temporarily. Can anyone tell me what sword repair is? This time, no sword repairer spoke. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to speak, the mediocre-looking sword repairman with no brilliance said again. Sword repair is sword repair. Every sword repairer with a different purpose will cultivate a different sword. This seems to be a nonsense sentence, but it has a unique and extremely insight. Even Jian Wushuang smiled knowingly. That's right, what's your name? Hui Jian Tingguan, my name is Su Jin. The mediocre Jian Xiu replied. Very good name, said Jian Wushuang. Su Jin, now I want to ask you to do something for me. Go to any mountain in Xiaogushan and find a weed. Then give it to me. He didn't hesitate at all. After he promised, he turned and left the dojo, heading for the mountains and rivers. Afterwards, Jian Wushuang said again. The so-called real sword repair is to completely abandon foreign objects, feel the slash of fantai from the way of the heart, and release the insight into the sword style and sword intent in the heart. Compared to Dingxiu, even to Yin Xian, the road of sword repair is a dead end. Only those with great perseverance will gradually become clear about their goals. Who among you has realized your own kendo, even if it is a framework? All the sword repairers bowed their heads. They were the most mediocre sword repairs, and they could only barely condense their own sword intent. Even as the top repair aptitude for cultivation strength, they are by no means outstanding. And those who can perceive their own swordsmanship are all shocking Tianjiao. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4888. Therefore, Jian Wushuang's question was a question of nothing. Even the 3 Yinxian Jianxiu lowered their heads in embarrassment. And this result was roughly the same as he had guessed. It would be really astonishing if a swordsman had realized his own kendo. Since there are none, it means that there is still strong plasticity, and it is not a bad thing. Jian Wushuang said afterwards, Among you, how many of you specialize in swords? All the sword repairers looked at each other, and like the previous few times, no one stood up. Nearly more than 3,000 sword cultivators, in the final analysis, are still focusing on cultivating power. Giving birth to a source of immortality, and becoming an immortal is their ultimate goal. Compared with the ethereal sword immortal, becoming a Yin Xian is much more reliable. As Jian Wushuang said earlier, taking the sword as the way is too illusory. Even if there is Dingxiu persistence, it will inevitably give up due to various results. The path of kendo is not accomplished overnight. It is not an overly clear goal, and it can only be clear in the path of continuous advancement. Even though there are thousands of supreme true swords in the Great Yanhuan, they are only media. the media through which Yanxian increases the damage of his moves to the highest level. And these sword repairs also become sword repairs because of this principle. In simple terms, they repair swords, in fact they serve Yanli Dedeo. At this moment, one of the 3 sword cultivation immortals, facing the old man, said, "Sword Tianguan, if you look at it according to your standards, I'm afraid I'm just a sluggish thing. For real kendo, I am afraid that I will not be able to comprehend the Tao after waiting my life. But now that the Sword Heaven official appeared, I waited to see the real sword doctrine, and I was very emotional. I only hope that the Sword Heaven official can give some insights, and let us find the right way." After he finished speaking, he solemnly bowed to Jian Wushuang, and more than 3,000 sword repairmen also bowed at the same time. The path of repairing the sword was too illusory, and they were able to stick to it so far, which was a rather remarkable thing. After listening to these words, Jian Wushuang didn't say much. His hands released his strength, and turned into a breeze to hold them all up. "I have accepted everything you said." All sword repairers were extremely excited at this moment. Xie Jian Tianguan. The ability to slay a third-ranked great Yanxian with a pure sword without a trace of strength, such as shocking the world and unprecedented deeds, has already been deeply imprinted in their minds. It turns out that the real kendo is such a power. In fact, from the time when he stood on the sword dojo field, Jian Wushuang had already planned to create a sword doctrine that they could control for these top repairers who insisted on the path of sword repair. After holding up all the sword repairs in the dojo, he stood quietly in the center of the dojo, as if waiting for something. The dojo was extremely silent, and none of the top shio spoke, all looking forward to Jian Wushuang. Time passed by, and Jian Wushuang was also a little puzzled at this moment. Su Jin, who was invited to pick a weed by him, should have returned long ago. He hasn't returned yet. Could it be that he has encountered something unexpected? Just as he was wondering, an extremely strong and thick streamer rushed from the horizon, full of majestic momentum. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed slightly, and he noticed a bit of unkindness from the visitors. In the next moment, that powerful streamer came suddenly. Boom! The entire dojo was shaken. The visitor was a sturdy bald man with a fierce face. He had a naked chest, and only a wide animal skin tied around his waist. His whole figure looked wild and full of oppression. In his left hand, Su Jin, with a blue nose and a swollen face, was almost fainting. Seeing this scene, Chun Qing outside the dojo screamed secretly, and he wanted to go up and knock the troublemaker to the ground. But Di Qing then pulled him back. "Don't go now, Wushuang can solve it." When Chun Qing heard the words, he no longer reluctantly, but stared at the bald man with bull eyes, ready to fight at any time. Before Jian Wushuang could speak, the bald man carrying Su Jin said loudly, "Who is the guy who killed Chang Duoling? Who is the guy who killed Chang Duoling?" After several bursts, Jian Wushuang's eardrums were a little buzzing. His face gradually became unkind. "It's me." The bald man was startled, and then he glanced up and down at Jian Wushuang, as if he didn't believe him at all. "Just you? A mere peak of Yanxian can kill Chang Duoling? Why do you want to try?" Jian Wushuang's voice gradually became colder. The bald man smirked when he heard the words. "Of course, I am here today to try your depth." Looking at the exposing man in front of him, Jian Wushuang is obviously lacking in interest. "I don't have time now, you stand aside first, maybe after I finish teaching, maybe you can do something with you." "I don't follow, I have to compete with you now," he said impatiently. The sword has no double-sided color, and suddenly took a step, and then a million ray of light sword intent rushed into the sky, causing great changes in the world. "I'll say it again, if you dare to mess around again, don't blame me for throwing you out of cramps." Looking at the majestic sword intent of the man who rushed straight into the sky, the bald man swallowed subconsciously. "Okay, wait for you for a moment." Converging his sword intent, Jian Wushuang said angrily, "Also let him go, now he is my disciple." The bald man then threw Su Jin aside, wiping off the blood that was falling from the corners of her mouth. Su Jin struggled to get up, and then came to Jian Wushuang with vain steps. Then he tremblingly took out a blade of sharp grass weed from his arms, and grudgingly said with a smile, Jian Tianguan, I sent the grass, but fortunately it was not broken. Reaching out to take the weed, Jian Wushuang asked, did he hit? A touch of embarrassment and sadness flashed in Su Jin's eyes, and she nodded. Jian Wushuang was not talking, waved his hand to release a gust of breeze to support him to the edge of the dojo, and then began to do the next thing. Looking at the 7-leaf weed in his hand, Jian Wushuang randomly folded a leaf and placed it in his hand. Next, I want to teach you the sword intent from simple to complex. This sword intent is my temporary realization. For you it should be a brand new starting point. This sword intent has a total of 9 sword styles, which are developed step by step. Although each of the sword styles seems to be unrelated, they complement each other. It is also the principle from simple to deep, from simple to complex. Jian Wu held the blade of grass in his hands and pointed at the sky of Yinwan Yinshu. For the time being, call it Flowing Cloud Grass Sword. 4 simple big characters can completely summarize the 9 sword intents. I am afraid that even Jian Wushuang now will not know how terrible and profound the impact of the Flowing Cloud Grass Sword he created will be in the future. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4889. As a sword book that can help sword repairers avoid getting lost in the way of repairing the sword. There are 9 styles of Luyan grass sword in the whole spectrum, and the front and back are smoothly connected, and it is very classic. The first 6 styles are all the most basic sword-using theories, including the most common sword styles, such as the sword, cross-cut, and block attack. It wasn't until the beginning of the 7th formula that the entire spectrum of Luyan Chaojian pose went from simple to complex, and the 7 swords were unified, releasing the infinite trend. The first 6 styles are called Jian, consisting of 6 styles. Juxing Lianyue, going to water, Huiqing, Changshan, and Pingting. The last 3 styles are called complex, consisting of grass leaves turning green, eyebrows trimming 4 seasons, and birds turning off. Jian Wushuang took the trouble disassembled and analyzed each of these sword styles over and over again, trying to crush each sword style into their heads. All the sword repairs went from initial doubts to deep thoughts, and then to shining eyes, wishing to empty their brains, leaving only this spectrum of flowing clouds and grass swords. Even Chen Qing, Chun Qiu and others who were sitting in the void were digesting this knowledge. It's over. Sword Brothers not only fights against the sky in actual combat, but even the theory has reached an incredible level, Chen Qing exclaimed, holding his forehead with his hand. These little boys are making a lot of money, Sword Brothers said. I am afraid it will completely change them. There are only 9 flowing clouds and grass sword styles in total, which can be said to be a master sword style from entry to exquisite. This completely changed Jian Xiu's state of blindness before he got a certain kind of kendo inheritance, so that every sword Xiu didn't have to be confused in the early stage. It is foreseeable that this flowing clouds and grass sword style will have a very far-reaching impact. He didn't speak, just stared at Jian Wushuang's teaching, took a deep breath, and whispered a conclusion softly. Without a Chinese year, including but not limited to Desiyu, all sword repairers will surely know Wushuang's name. Such a shocking sentence was uttered from the true meaning of the 9th Revolution Dian Immortal, which shocked Chen Qing, Chuan Xiu and all other immortals. But none of them refuted, and they all seemed to think that this sentence was extremely correct. As long as this flowing cloud grass sword style is released, the Sword Brothers will definitely be supported by all sword repairs, Chen Qing murmured. Thinking about it this way, he is terrible. In spring and autumn, Cui Jing and others did not speak, but subconsciously clenched their fists, their eyes hot. Brother Jian really a stunner. Wei Liujia murmured, his eyes hot. After Jian Wushuang stopped the last flying bird, there were a total of 9 Luyan grass sword gestures, and all the demonstrations were completed. The dojo is dead, and every sword repairman has a different expression. They are trying their best to remember this complete sword spectrum. At this moment, they know very clearly that this will be a new starting point and a great fortune. If you do not grasp this time, it will always be an unimaginable loss. Slowly exhaling a murky breath, Jian Wushuang felt that even the battle with Chong dueling was not as tired as today. It seems that preaching is really exhausting, and you should do less in the future. Then, more than 3,000 Jian Xiu all spontaneously knelt on one knee, facing Jian Wushuang again, bowing again. Jian Wushuang didn't like this form of tape, but he didn't stop them. After all of them had done their salutes, he said again, "These 9 sword styles, you need to practice diligently. As for how far you can reach, it's up to you." Nuan. The voices of more than 3,000 sword repairmen rushed into the sky, magnificent. At this point, Jian Wushuang's teaching was completely over, and he left 9 flowing clouds and grass sword styles. And in this exciting group of dojos, there is a guy who is not in the state the whole time. Nor is it to walk, nor is it not to walk, just like a tree standing in place, quite embarrassing. Jian Wushuang finally looked at him in this way. "Hey, that bald head. How did you know that I killed Chong dueling?" The bald man took another look at him, and then said, "Don't you know? Now the entire Great Division region has spread madness. It is said that in the 6 heavens realm, a Yinxian killed Chong dueling with his own power. I didn't believe it, so I ran over and prepared to have a few tricks with that guy to explore the reality." Jian Wushuang heard the words. "Then you are not afraid. The guy who can kill Chong dueling is in a bad mood. Will you also solve it? Don't be afraid, I have my own fairy style. Even if I meet Chong dueling, I am confident that I can't beat and run away." The bald man patted his chest confidently. "You tell me the truth, Chong duo, did you really kill Ling?" "Of course." He nodded. "That's good, I'm going to try it with you now." The bald man was excited in his eyes. Jian Wushuang did not refuse, but turned to look at San Qian Yinxian in the dojo. "Now, I only use this blade of grass in my hand to show you the real flowing cloud grass sword style. Stop talking nonsense. Let me see if Yinxian who can kill Chong dueling exists or not." The bald-headed man smiled grimly, and then thousands of dark yellow evolving forces, like real dragons surging out from under his feet, rise to the sky. The realm that belonged to the peak of immortality was revealed, and at the same time, the figure of the bald man suddenly increased to several times, like a true god. Even Chen Qing, who was more than 10 feet tall, looked handsome in front of the bald man at this moment. Looking at the giant like a god, Jian Wushuang was very interested. Holding a blade of grass in his right hand, he moved forward. "Take it to death," the bald man yelled. His fist slammed into the ground of the dojo, and more than 10 dark yellow real dragons formed by Yanli rushed to Jian Wushuang. At this moment, even the sky was covered by the dark yellow light. All Jian Xiu and Ding Xiu watched this scene nervously. Jumping beam clown. After Diqing summed up such a conclusion, he was already lacking in interest, and he simply closed his eyes to refresh himself. Chen Qing also pouted. "I think this trouble-seeking guy is also a great fairy. I never thought it was a fairy. This is really boring." In the spring and autumn period, Cui Jing and others' expressions were roughly the same, looking at the bald man on the dojo who was struggling hard like a fool. Jian Wushuang held a blade of grass in his right hand, and his long black hair continued to dance behind him along with his clothes. Facing the dark yellow Yanli real dragon that covered the sky and earth before him, Jian Wushuang held the palm of the blade of grass, and only made a downward slashing action. Broken, like the water flowing, the more than 10 real dragons carrying violent powers were disconnected from them, without any signs. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4890. As if being cut away by some kind of great force, the bald man's offensive was directly broken. The eyes of all Jian Xiu and Ding Xiu who were watching were suddenly frozen. They saw it really. Jian Wushuang's blade of grass chopped off, condensing a 10,000 zhang sword light, and easily smashed the bald man's offensive. Could it be that even the blade of grass can release a strong sword intent? With a flick of the blade of grass in his hand, Jian Wushuang said in a low voice, "If you are not able to threaten my offensive, I advise you to return to wherever you came from, so that I won't throw you out. Arrogance comes at a price." The bald man was furious. His figure soared by several meters, and the dark yellow power surging around his body became more surging and terrifying. Zhu Matian. Along with his roar, the entire tens of thousands of feet of the dojo was quietly covered with a layer of illusory dust. And in the dust, Jian Wushuang could feel that his own power was slowly fading. This is a fairy style used by a bald man. But after experiencing the battle with Chang Duoling, he could feel that his perception had reached another level, including the pure realm of his own power, and the control of kendo, are no longer comparable. If this bald man who had mastered the reality before might still be able to fight Jian Wushuang for several rounds, but now, all this has changed. He could even completely defeat the bald man by using any Xingguohai sword intent. But Jian Wushuang didn't do that. In order to better integrate knowledge and action, and better teach the sword repairers present, he used the flowing cloud grass sword style. The 7th style, the grass leaves turn green. The successful smile on the bald man's face hadn't even completely disappeared. The next moment his fairy-like giant desert sky was completely broken by the 7 vast sword intent. These 7 sword intents are the shadows of the 7 blades of grass. After easily breaking the fairy style, all of them slashed towards him without any reduction. The bald-headed man reacted slowly for a while, unable to dodge, and was struck by 7 swords in a row. Damn it, it's weird. He was frightened and released the immortal style again. Mountains and rivers are transformed. As the bald man's voice fell, his huge and sturdy figure swelled to an unimaginable level once again, and his entire skin showed a grayish-yellow color, like a raised rock. Then he was like a walking mountain, violently crashing into Jian Wushuang. And Jian Wushuang obviously didn't want to engage in this meaningless battle, and directly released the flowing clouds grass sword style. The 8th style, eyebrow cut 4 seasons. Slashing the blade of grass in the hand, this sword style is more sophisticated and complicated than the 7th style, and is the pinnacle of the entire spectrum of Luyin grass sword style. This sword has a total of 8 swords, and it combines the pinnacle sword of the first 7 styles. The 8 sword styles are unified, which is enough to overshadow the 4 seasons. Between the grass leaf eyebrows, a million strands of sword intent were startled, and he slashed straight forward. The bald man, who was running wild, only felt that a big crisis flashed in his mind, and then he made a decisive decision and directly defended on the spot. But the 8th style of the flowing cloud grass sword is really too vast, especially if it is performed by Jian Wushuang himself. Its power is infinite. Almost just in this encounter, the bald man was swallowed by the infinite sword intent. Bang! Bang! Zheng! There was a thumping sound from the entire dojo, which was completely condensed by generative power. The cobweb-like crack appeared where the bald man was standing. 8 Dao-strong sword intents, 1 sword and 1 sword slashed down, even if Yinxian had already disappeared. But the bald man was different. His ability to resist was almost to a terrifying point. Even if the sword intent left indelible damage on him, he didn't say a word. The dojo is collapsing. When the last strong sword intent fell, everything returned to peace. The smoke dissipated, and the scene that followed made all the sword repairers enthusiastic. It turns out that the flowing clouds grass sword style will have such a power to reach the top. I saw that bald man. Now most of his figure was smashed into the dojo, like a blood man, lying on his back on the dojo, without knowing his life or death. Jian Wushuang stepped forward slowly, looking at the bald man with a slight surprise in his heart. He was very clear about how strong the sword intent released by his hand was. As long as it was under Dian Immortal, no immortal yin could bear it. But right now this guy can withstand it. Although it is a bit horrible, his Xianyuan has not suffered any damage. Jian Wushuang finally came to understand why this guy would come forward to challenge without fear. It was purely because of his thick skin. If he was replaced by another immortal, I am afraid that he would not be able to hammer him. After sighing in his heart, he directly waved his hand to pull the bald man out of the dojo, and threw it out of Xiao Gudian with a little force. After doing all this, Jian Wushuang looked at all the top repairs in the dojo and said calmly, "This is the power of the Luyan grass sword style." As he said, he stretched out his hand and threw it, and the blade of grass in his hand fell like a stream of light in the center of the entire dojo. At the same time the blade of grass fell to the ground, it stood upright in the center of the dojo like a small sword, and 99 streams of light gushed out of the blade of grass, turning into rows of colorful flowers covering the surrounding. These 99 sword intents are the entire spectrum of flowing clouds and grass sword style. You can feel it at any time. And tell you one more thing. I have a strand of my own kendo hidden in that blade of grass. If someone can pull out that blade of grass by then, whoever owns the strand of kendo inside. As soon as these words came out, all sword repairs were extremely enthusiastic, looking at the blade of grass standing in the center of the dojo. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly, and at the same time he stretched out the palm of his right hand, and a bird condensed by the intent of the sword began to chirping. This is the 9th style of Luyan Chaojian, and the bird stops. This is the most subtle sword, the simplest sword, but also the most complicated one. The flying bird came out of Jian Wushuang's hand, flapped its wings and flew in the air, and finally landed on the blade of grass in the center of the dojo, and began to fall asleep. Someone may ask whether the Luyan grass sword can be cultivated to the realm of great success. Now I will tell you, of course it can. Chapter 4891. Jian Wushuang's mind was relaxed after returning to the temple from the southernmost border of Xiao Gudian. After the battle with Chang Duoling, he slept for nearly 10 years, and didn't have time to sort out his own situation. So what he has to do now is to sort out the Xinghe Lake Sea sword intent, and the immortal style. After returning to the palace, Jian Wushuang did not rush to sit down, but sat on the top of the palace, overlooking the remodeled Xiao Gudian. Di Qing, who was following him, seemed to have something to say, and looked at Jian Wushuang from time to time. "Do you have anything you want to tell me?" "Yes." Di Qing was slightly surprised and then asked, "Did you go where before the last war?" Jian Wushuang heard the words and nodded. "Going to get some insights in the next 3 days. That immortality that gave you your understanding is not easy," Di Qing said slowly, his voice a little dignified. I felt his breath, and at the same time even I felt his power. Jian Wushuang was slightly surprised. He knew the arrogance of the clear meaning, and being able to let him say this sentence meant that the strength of Yuanjun might still be higher than him. Above rank 9 Dian Immortal. I am afraid there is only Pinnacle Dian Immortal. The hostility on his body is also too great. This is the first time I have seen Yu Yangxian's hostility so strong. Diqing looked at him. The reason why I said this to you is hope you better stay away from him. Jian Wushuang said. He cultivates the way of killing, so it should be a matter of common sense that the hostility is huge. Diqing cast his gaze to the void. In addition to the hostility, I also felt some inexplicable aura from him. He nodded. I will be aware and alert. Diqing wanted to say something but stopped, and finally didn't say anything. After standing on the top of the temple for a while, the two of them returned to the temple. Sitting at the top of the jade seat, Jian Wushuang was still thinking about what Diqing had just said, and he felt more and more reasonable. Due to the different flow of time, he stayed in Yuanjun's domain for nearly 2,000 years, and in this relatively long period of time, he fought against Yuanjun for more than 1,000 years. During this time, he didn't feel any thoughts of Yuanjun, which was extremely mysterious. The reason why Jian Wushuang felt that Daiking's words had some truth was because he had also noticed the strange aura of Yuanjun that was inexplicable during his time with Yuanjun. That kind of weird aura was very abrupt and mysterious. Even if Jian Wushuang had paid attention to it, he couldn't guess what it was. Could it be that he has any other intentions? Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and thought. Seeing this, Diqing on the side thought he was asleep, so he directly stretched out his hand and used the rules of Supreme Avenue to extinguish the light of the entire Xiaogu Tian. Xiaogu Tian entered the night and was silent. Time passed by, and just as Diqing was ready to sleep, a fluctuating breath made him alert. In the next moment, his figure disappeared directly, and then he appeared outside the hall, and then he looked at the side of the hall, where the fluctuating aura came from. The moon is black and wind is high in the night, when it is sneaky. I saw in the dim night a figure with no wisps on his body, and 2 buttocks exuding a weird luster, was crawling on the wall and babbling. Why? There is nowhere to vent your energy, are you going to run naked? A fluttering voice of inquiry sounded. The bare-bottomed guy who was climbing the wall didn't look back, and subconsciously said, Can you control it? Then, as if he was aware of something, the tiger's body shook, and he slowly turned his head stiffly. Diqing smiled coldly, and directly slammed his fist. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes, only to hear the sound of fighting outside the hall, and then Diqing appeared in the hall carrying a small mountain. After the boom, he saw the scene of spicy eyes. I saw a naked man lying on all sides in the center of the hall, with a swollen nose, and a swollen nose. He was obviously beaten up. The corners of Jian Wushuang's eyes twitched. Although the man had a bruised nose and swollen face, he still knew at a glance that this man was the bald man who had fought with him in the Luanjian dojo not long ago. This guy, didn't you let me throw Xiaogu Tian? Diqing curled his lips. Who knows, lying sneaking outside the temple, I don't know what it is. The bald man who had been beaten by Diqing shook his head vigorously, and then looked dizzy left and right. When he saw Jian Wushuang sitting on the top, his gaze suddenly condensed. Then he got up at an extremely fast speed, knelt down heavily on one knee, and shouted, Fengshan has seen the Lord. The corners of Jian Wushuang's eyes twitched again. You guy, didn't you get thrown out of Xiaogu Tian? Why did you come back? Is it possible that you are unwilling to lose? Hearing this, the bald man waved his hand hurriedly. No, you have misunderstood it. Fengshan was convinced that what he lost was convinced. I just want to understand it, and I will follow the adults from today. After Jian Wushuang heard this, he raised his brows slightly. Are you planning to follow me? Why? He touched his head and smiled slyly. Since I became an immortal, the only person who can beat me without any backhand in the same realm is you, an adult. So it's not shameful for Fengshan to follow you. Jian Wushuang smiled, obviously amused by the outspoken words of this silly boy, and then reached out and directly took out a uniform from the ring and threw it to him. I'd better put on my clothes and talk. The bald man took the clothes and smiled awkwardly. When he was thrown out before he fainted. When Yu woke up reading www.akanshu.com, it became like this. After he got dressed, Jian Wushuang waved his hand and said, "Go back quickly, I am wandering, and I won't do much by my side, it will delay you." After hearing this, he hurriedly said, "I am not afraid of adults, as long as I can be by your side. I have been sitting there for several years before I have achieved what I am today. Even if I do not have any major achievements in the future, I will be able to travel with adults." Area. Seeing his firm face, Jian Wushuang didn't know how to refuse, so he could only say, "Or you can stay with me first, and I won't stop you if you want to leave in the future." Without waiting for the bald man to be ecstatic, Di Qing directly flew up and kicked him out of the hall, closing the hall door by the way. Jian Wushuang was surprised. "Di Qing, you are? Take care of what this kind of inflexible fool does." Di Qing patted his palms. "Beat him twice and I won't bother you. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4892. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly. Although he didn't agree with Daiking's approach, it was also a one-time solution. Now Yanxian who is following him has a clear truth, Chuanxiu, Cui Jing, Zhaoting, and Wei Liujia. If there are more and more Yanxian following, this is indeed a bond for him. He has no intention of establishing a power of his own in this great development, so he does not want to develop in this direction. To explore the ultimate of Dianhuan alone, to find the whereabouts of Xian Yi and Lao Zun, is what he wants to do. Since Di Qing closed the door of the temple, he also set up a barrier of Yanli. Even though the door of the bald man photographed outside the temple was shaking, there was no way to enter the temple. Jian Wushuang also sat down and began to sort out his kendo in immortal style. Now he has 3 ways to guard his body, namely the way of guarding him ascending to the seat of the eternal God, the way of Wushuang's sword, and the way of killing that he has learned from Yuanjun. The 3 ways are close to the body, and the great luck derived from it is extremely abundant, continuously nourishing Jian Wushuang and enriching his sentiment. Since the way of killing was inspired by the blood of the Sand Devil's Cave, the cause and effect and the big killings in it have not disappeared, and they are still attached to him. This caused Jian Wushuang a very headache. If there is no way to resolve it, he will go to the so-called Tongtian Buddha realm to find a solution in the future. In addition to the elusive way of killing, Jian Wushuang could clearly feel that after the battle with Chang Duoling, his own immortal style in Wushuang Kendo had undergone a complete and thorough transformation. Could it be that after every complete destruction of the immortal body, recovery will strengthen itself? Jian Wushuang was a little puzzled. From now on, it was indeed possible. If the immortal body really has this effect, then I am afraid that it is its true sky-defying and terrifying place. If this were to die hundreds of times. While he secretly calculated these feasibility, Chen Qing's voice suddenly came from outside the hall. Immediately, Di Qing stretched out his hand to withdraw the enchantment. Chen Qing hurriedly pushed the door and entered. "Brother Sword, Zai Audijin invites you to Degushan. There is something to discuss." As he said, he walked quickly to Jian Wufang and said in a low voice, "It's Zai Audijin's 4th disciple, Lord Qian here." Jian Wushuang was stunned slightly, and when he came to the 6th-day realm at this node, I am afraid that young Master Qian had a plan. Then he nodded. "Okay." Chen Qing seemed to think of something again, scratching his head and said, "By the way, who is the guy who fell asleep outside the hall? I kicked him and didn't respond. I thought it was dead." Jian Wushuang was dumb, and then said, "Never mind him, let's go." With Di Qing accompanying, the 3 of them left Shaogudian and went straight to Degudian. When he was leaving the hall, Jian Wushuang saw the bald man who was lying outside the hall heartlessly asleep. He had no choice but to wave his hand and throw him into the hall. At this time, the newly rebuilt Degushan Tianyu was extremely quiet, and an array of nearly 100 fairy gods appeared, each of whom was wearing a white robe, with a gold wire engraved on his chest with the word Qian, obviously brought by Gongzikian. After just one glance, Jian Wushuang went straight to the heavenly palace where Little Emperor was. The palace was stern, and the little emperor's companion, the thin purple robe, had apparently been waiting outside the hall for a long time, and saw Jian Wushuang appear, and then led them to the hall. A curling cloud of celestial beings rose up, and although there were few celestial beings in the whole hall, it was full of depression. Stepping into the hall, Jian Wushuang locked the figure, who was sitting on one side with a pretty good appearance at a glance. The 7 emperors under the seat of Zhen Wuyang. If they are considered handsome, the little emperor deserves the first place, and then the son is Qian. And that son Qian also locked Jian Wushuang for the first time. His eyes were quite meaningful. Xiaodijin slowly got up and faced Jian Wushuang. Even the eldest brother has to get up to greet each other. It seems that the 4th brother has to treat each other with courtesy. The son Qianling laughed, and then got up. Jian Wushuang picked a seat at random, and He Diqing took a seat, and Xiao Dijuan also returned to the original place, looking at Gong Ziqian with a gloomy expression. Come on, what are you doing here? Gong Ziqian smiled again. Of course I came to visit Big Brother. This is the first time I have come to visit Big Brother, since our brothers went to their respective enclaves. Don't go around talk about things. Xiaodijin's eyes flashed with impatientness. There is indeed something to discuss with Big Brother, and this matter is also harmful to Big Brother. Gong Ziqian said directly. I want to form an alliance with Big Brother. Xiaodijin glanced at him obliquely when he heard the words. I'm not interested. If you come only for this matter, then roll back wherever you came from. After hearing this, the young master Qian grinned slowly, and then cast his gaze on Jian Wushuang. If I guess it is right, this one should be well known in all heavens for more than 10 years. Kill the celestial official of Jiutianxianjunchang dueling. Jian Wushuang did not answer, and continued to observe his nose and heart. And Xiao Dijuan also said in a cold voice at this time. What if it is? So what if it is not? I count 3 times. If you don't roll again, don't blame this seat for being polite. Brother, don't be so impatient. The alliance I said will only benefit you today. Young Master Qian stood up and said in a deep voice. Now your 6-day realm must be lost in that battle. It's the end of the battle. And what I want to tell you now is that the hundreds of immortals who died in that battle have not even hurt them. The real battle is far from beginning. Xiao Dijuan looked at him and sneered. They? Young Master corrects. You reading www. Akanshu. Calm young master you. Is there no you? Of course there is no me in this. But I just happen to know all of this. Gong Ziqian smiled secretly. As long as we are in an alliance, I will naturally tell everything I know. It's okay if you want to form an alliance. Tell me your purpose, Xiaodijin said. I want to be honest. Young Master Qian stretched his hands. The purpose is not as complicated as you think, purely because I just want to be a mediocre emperor, and I don't want to get involved in this too complicated dispute. Little Emperor said coldly, state the purpose. Chapter 4893. After Gong Ziqian finished speaking, he waited for a reply. Your heaven is based on my 6-day realm, even farther than going to Duotian. This decision you made is really stupid. Xiaodijin said coldly. The son Qianling laughed. As long as you agree to form an alliance, my elusive Xianzhou will open the fairy formation to the 6-day realm immediately. Little Emperor did not answer him, but continued to ask, how many immortals are there under your seat? He said again, no more no less 300 whole, if I send it all out more. In the end Xiaodi Jundao can form alliances. The son said humbly, I have already said that this alliance is absolutely beneficial and harmless to you, brother. But how can I believe that you are not a prince to fight their gangsters and lure me into the bait? Xiao Dijuan asked again, looking at him with a smile. This is the end of the matter, so I will tell you all. You don't have to worry that I and the young man are in the same camp, the young man said generously, because I am now voluntarily withdrawing. Because neither myself nor my ethereal Xianzhou have a relatively weak background. At the beginning, for self-protection reasons, I entangled with the sun. But in the next period of time, I found that young Master Jiu was consuming my ethereal Xianzhis background, either intentionally or unintentionally, and even directly intervened in taking over the Xianxian under my seat, trying to lift me up. After I noticed it, I immediately broke off the alliance with him until today. After listening to Xiaodigen, he said leisurely, "Then you are afraid that the sun will completely defeat me, and then turn around to find your trouble. So you start to be strong and come to form an alliance with me?" Gongzikian nodded, looked at him and said, "Yes, and this seems to be helping you, but it's actually helping myself. Listen to what you mean, who are in the same camp as the young master. Now there are two emperors. Yes, after the fifth brother's death, now only Gong Ziyu and Gong Zihua are following him. What about young Master Lin?" Little Emperor asked intentionally or unintentionally. The son said in a modest way, No one cares about him." Xiaodigen slowly got up and paced in this hall. "You just said, what does it mean that the real battle has not started yet? Will they do it again in such a short time?" Young Master Qian nodded his head, his eyes a little solemn. "Yes, all they have done is to rush you before the emperor returns to the Great Division, and even kill you. It's really courageous. It seems that the death of young Master Amo has actually boosted their arrogance." Xiaodigen sneered. Young Master Qian also got up and came to him. "So, in order not to be the next young Master Amo, let's start the alliance." The gang wind raged in the void. After the shocking battle 10 years ago, the void outside the six-day realm had no signs of recovery. There were curling and broken void cracks everywhere, and it was extremely desolate. In front of the portal of the six-day realm, the nearly 100 evangelists brought by Gongzikian, at this moment, all released the most majestic evangelizing power, building an immortal formation. Gongzikian said, "Brother, within half a day, the immortal formation from the ethereal Xianzhou to the six-day realm will be completed. At that time, all the immortals sent will be sent by the eldest brother." Xiao Dijuan did not answer him, but looked at Jian Wushuang and asked in a low voice, "You said, when will the next time the sun corrects a trouble?" When Jian Wushuang was about to speak, the entire shattered void suddenly shook, as if it had been hit by something. In the next moment, at the end of the endless void, a giant tearing void that can hardly be described in words appeared. This giant floats in the void, even larger than a celestial plane. It looks like a giant tortoise, but its raised head has 4 sinuous horns and 6 eyes. The entire high-heavy back can fill a sky. All Yanxian in the void, seeing this giant turtle-like cow, took a breath of air conditioning. Armed cow. Haven't these strange beasts extinct? Why are they reappearing now? Young Master Qian frowned and said, "Arming cow." Jian Wushuang was puzzled, looking at the giant with almost no edges. He felt a little bit wrong inexplicably. Immediately afterwards, the little emperor explained, "This is a product of my emperor's youth. It is called an armox. It feeds on the universe and all creatures. If an armox wants to grow to adulthood, it needs to eat at least 10,000. It's a celestial realm, so it's a great disaster. There used to be emperors who used it as a mount to open up the realm with extreme ferocity. There are rumors that the limbs of the armox have the effect of stabilizing the heavenly plane. But now it seems to be true." During their conversation, at the same time this armox appeared, another armox of the same size appeared from the end of the void. "The appearance of this kind of strange beast is not a good sign," the young Master Qian said nervously. "You said, could this be sent by young Master?" As soon as this remark came out, everyone immediately became vigilant. It is extremely difficult for each armox to be killed after it reaches adulthood. Even the siege of dozens of immortals can hardly cause substantial damage to it. If these armoxen are really sent by the young master to spoil the situation, I am afraid the situation will be quite difficult. It seemed to confirm their guess that when the second armox appeared from the end of the void, the third armox also appeared. They all seemed to be floating in the void of the heavenly realm, and with an unimaginable shocking general trend, they collided towards the six-day realm. "Isn't it? It was really sent by young master?" Young Master Qian's face was pale. He never thought that the establishment of an alliance with Xiao Dijuan was about to go to war. Once a battle begins, I am afraid that the immortal emperor under his seat will be lost in this battle. With this in mind, Yu reading www.akanshu. He wanted to slap himself in the face. A total of 4 arm oxen rammed towards the 6-day realm. And along with the appearance of these arm oxen, there was a stream of light leaping from the back of the arm oxen, all gathered in the void. Streaming light one after another is a fairy. At a glance, there are no fewer than 300. Damn, these idiots, isn't Yanxian a mess of bad street? Send them here in batches. Gong Ziqian gritted his teeth. His heart was bleeding, and it took less than a day to form an alliance. And he encountered this battle. He was already thinking about how to minimize the casualties of sitting down. At this moment, Jian Wushuang said, "Give me 100 immortals." "Ah, only 100? Chapter 4894. Xiao Dijuan raised his eyebrows and looked at him. "Why, it's still too small. Or else you will bring all your wealth over." After reacting, young Master Qian immediately shook his head like a rattle. 100 is good, 100 is enough. Then, he flew to the group of immortals who were still building the immortal formation, and roared, "Return the immortal formation, and quickly gather them for me." Hearing this, nearly 100 Yanxian did not dare to disobey young Master Qian, and hurriedly stopped to build an immortal formation and gather. Gong Ziqian was still not at ease. He directly released Yanli, and destroyed the rudimentary immortal formation, only to take a breath. His move fell into Jian Wushuang's eyes, unconsciously a little funny. His move was to avoid misfortunes, and spread the flames of war along the fairy array to his ethereal Xianzhou. However, there is nothing wrong with Gong Ziqian's doing this, and he can't even blame him. After all, at this point, he has not abandoned the alliance, and has gathered nearly 100 immortals. For the entire 6-day realm, this is a gift in the snow, and the capital for the Jedi to fight back. Without the arrival of Gong Ziqian, this battle would really be very likely to destroy the entire 6-day realm. A total of 4 arm oxen that were larger than the heavenly plane appeared, almost crowding the originally broken void. Jian Wushuang saw it most vividly, and on the back of every arm ox, there was actually a powerful fairy formation. This is crazy. 4 arm oxen, which are more expansive than Tianyu, are carrying a square fairy formation. Except for the more than 300 Yanxians who have already been present. This is the most terrifying thing about the immortal formations that can connect to the void universe. This battle will be an endless situation. Gong Ziqian's face turned pale, and he also saw this terrible scene. It's over, it's over. It seems that all of my hundreds of Yanxians are going to be folded here. It is unimaginable how many top repairs and evolving immortals can be dispatched from the 4 completely completed immortal formations. It can be said that as long as the mastermind wanted to, he could even send a whole celestial force at the other end of the fairy formation to destroy the 6-day realm. Little Emperor also frowned, looking at Jian Wushuang a little heavy. Brother Jian, this battle. In this situation now, there are 4 different beasts and arm oxen, carrying 4 immortal formations, and they are fighting with more than 300 immortals. There are so many that can be seen, but how many will be invisible? For a time even Jian Wushuang was very solemn. Now that the 6-day realm can be used, there are even more than 100 immortals under the seat of young Master Qian. It is simply not right to the extreme. The complexion on the side of the Sun Qian kept changing, and finally gritted his teeth. Big brother, it's better to escape. Anyway, the ultimate goal of the sun to correct them is only for your 6-day realm. As long as the emperor comes back, everything will be solved naturally. Xiao Dijuan did not reply. Looking at Jian Wushuang, he seemed to be waiting for him to make a decision. For a moment, Jian Wushuang said, "You can't escape, let alone escape or not. It's just this posture. This time, they are probably not just to destroy the 6-day realm. Is it possible?" The young man swallowed the second half of the sentence abruptly, his complexion ugly. "This battle is inevitable. Give me 100 immortals." Jian Wushuang looked at him. Gong Ziqian nodded. "Or how much do you keep for me?" Ignoring him, Jian Wushuang immediately looked at Diqing, who was beside him. "Next, I will leave you with these hundreds of fairy cultivators. You drag those fairy cultivators, and I will break the fairy formation." Diqing nodded. "Don't worry. Brother Sword, I'll be with you." Chun Qing said in a deep voice. I Chun Qing can fight and help you break through. Jian Wushuang nodded, and did not refuse. Xia Audijin also looked at Gong Ziqian at this time. Are you not going to leave? All the immortals under my seat are here. Where can I go by myself? Gong Ziqian's eyes twitched. Just begging me to lose a little less. Xiao Dijuan was also a little surprised at his performance, and after taking a deep look at him, he looked forward. With the 4 huge and vast arm oxen completely stagnating in front of the portal of the 6-day realm, a great battle was inevitable. There are nearly 300 Yangxians overwhelming the sky, and each Yanxian has raised its own realm to the top, with various colors rising into the sky, full of inspiring trends. At the moment in the 6-day realm, there are only more than 100 immortals from the young Master Qian. The gap between the two is really too big, almost not on the same level at all. Once the war starts, it can be expected that the battle will be inevitable, will be extremely optimistic. In front of these 300 Yangxians, 6 slowly walked out of the extremely mysterious figures wearing black robes. And every mysterious figure holds a dark scepter in his hands, which invisibly makes all Yanxian feel oppressed. At the next moment, 6 black-robed figures simultaneously held up the scepter in their hands, and 6 endless majestic forces shot out from the top of the stick, forming a bunch of piercing through the broken void. Unimaginable violent winds raged instantly, tearing and distorting the void ceaselessly. Attention among the 6 black robes, there are 2 Dian immortals. Di Qing quickly reminded Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked at him then nodded. I will. The Sunqian's expression on the side changed drastically. He was obviously regretting it to the extreme. The current scene is almost the same as sending him to death in vain. Brother, it's really too late if you don't leave. The fairy formation will be opened. Even if the emperor wants to protect you, it will be too late. Xiao Dijuan glanced at him. Shut up, no one knows what the result will be until the last moment. After that, he drew out the soft sword around his waist. If you want to keep as many immortals as possible under your seat, then let them be dispatched by the Sword Heaven official in the next time. Gong Ziqian is already anxious and angry, but he is not easy to attack, so he can only say angrily, Fuck, let it go. Along with the beams of light emitted by the 6 black-robe figures at the same time, Yu read www. The entire void dome of Akanshu, calm is condensed into a vortex, in which there is a thunder and lightning strikes, which is terrible to the extreme. At the same time, the 4 different beasts arm oxen, which were larger than the heavenly plane, raised their heads and neighed at the same time. Chapter 4895. In order to leave a little bit of leeway for himself, young Master Qian, who has turned his face, suddenly grabbed the supreme true sword in his hand. All the immortals will give me to keep up with the Sword Heaven official. If there is a violation, die on the battlefield. More than 100 Yanxian also completely released the Yanli realm at this moment, and they all followed Jian Wushuang. After he Diqing looked at each other, Jian Wushuang took the lead. Facing the army of immortals covering the sky and the earth, he was holding an invisible long sword, and marching forward in the air, as if everything in front of him could not be blocked. Behind him, followed by more than 100 Yanxian, Diqing also moved at this time. His arms shook, and 10 magnificent wings appeared directly behind him. He is like a world ruler of heaven, and the most magnificent Huameng shoots out from behind him. There are tens of thousands of golden feathers condensing infinite power to cut through the void, all pouring into the army of eternal immortals. The entire void seemed to burn completely, and the golden feather swept over it, instantly containing the impact. A style of galaxy sword intent burst out. The incomparable sword intent exploded directly in front, and several Yanxians were tired of coping, and were crushed into powder on the spot. Just under this one encounter, the power of Jian Wushuang and Di Qing directly turned the situation around, and nearly 30 evangelists died on the spot. Seeing this shocking scene, the young master in the rear, his brow jumped fiercely. He never expected that this terrible killer move was hidden in the camp of the 6-day realm. He looked at the 10-winged truth in the void, couldn't help swallowing his throat, already a little coveted. But Gong Ziqian quickly recovered his composure. This situation is just the beginning. Everything is uncertain, and should not be taken lightly. Just when he was about to pick a safe place and try to hide it, the little emperor beside him suddenly lifted his sword and joined the battle. Gong Ziyan, are you dying? They are all coming for you. Gong Ziqian shouted anxiously, but Xiao Dijuan had already left and ignored him. Damn it, it's all a bunch of rammed goods. He was anxious, and at the same time, he was watching this situation nervously. It was almost a crush, but he fell into a stalemate. With Diqing behind him, the pressure on Jian Wushuang's body was relieved. His whole figure was like a real sword with sharp edges, and nothing could hinder him. The 4 arm oxen are distributed in a product-shaped formation. What Jian Wushuang has to do at this moment is to destroy them one by one before the teleportation fairy formation is fully opened. The nearly 100 Yinxian behind him fought fiercely with the Yinxian army in an instant. The battle of nearly 500 immortals was even worse than the previous one, and it was even more shocking. In order to prevent this war from expanding again, only by destroying all the teleportation fairy formations can it be contained. The first army was closest to Jian Wushuang, and the fairy formation was about to open. Jian Wushuang locked it for the first time. Under the struggle of nearly 100 immortals, the encirclement was abruptly torn open. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate, and directly released the second form of Xinghuhe Jianyi, river. As if descending from the sky, the Qingdao River with endless might pouring down. Seeing this scene, all Yinxian was shocked and rushed out of the way. Under this sword intent, Jian Wushuang is confident that he can destroy the teleportation fairy array. But in the next moment, anomaly emerged. In the void in front of the arm ox, a crimson enchantment over 1,000,000 feet high suddenly condensed. The earth-shattering river-shaped sword intent collided with the crimson enchantment, and the endless power was vented wildly. Under such a terrifying collision, the crimson barrier began to be densely covered with cracks and gullies, which seemed to be broken in the next moment. But at this moment, a figure wearing a large black robe quietly appeared behind the barrier, and at the same time stretched out a palm to stick to the barrier. In an instant, a dense cobweb-like dark red silk thread clung to the barrier, quickly repairing the crack. The two cancelled each other out, and eventually the river-shaped sword intent disappeared, but the barrier was intact. Jian Wushuang's eyes were solemn, staring straight at the figure in the black robe. Waved to remove the barrier, the black robe figured and held a scepter in hand, and said coldly, "Go back wherever it came from. We want to kill young Master Yen, it has nothing to do with you. Fuck your mother, old beast, when you are old and weak, will you just slap your mouth?" Chen Qing, who was standing beside Jian Wushuang, burst into a loud voice, wishing to slash his sword directly. Smellmouth Jr. Hypo's figure coldly took a scepter in his hand, and suddenly a violent wind cut towards Chen Qing. Zhang. As soon as a sword came out, he directly cut off the violent wind. Jian Wushuang glanced at him coldly. "If you want to survive, just get out of it." Ignorance. He gave the scepter in his hand again, and his figure in black robe angered. In an instant, thousands of strands of dark red power gush out from under his black robe, like lotus petals unfolding in this void. As the black robe surged, a thin and old face appeared, and 2 dark red lights burst out of his pupils, which was extremely strange. Even Jian Wushuang felt uncomfortable when he saw that face and that look. Chen Qing cursed in a low voice before going forward to teach the black-robed old man a heavy lesson, but he stopped him. "You are not his opponent, he is Dian Immortal." Jian Wushuang reminded. Chen Qing was stunned, but she didn't dare. Damn it, when did so many big fairy immortals pop out from to see you? Jian Wushuang also frowned. He remembered that Chen Qing had told him earlier that, except for the elders under the seat of Zhenwuyang, the number of Dian immortals in Desiyu was no more than 2 hands. In terms of the harsh conditions for promotion and the environment of Desiyu, what Chen Qing said was correct, and Yinxian, who could be promoted to Dianxian, were indeed extremely rare. But right now, there are 2 more Dian immortals who participated in this battle. This is really a bit scary, coupled with the previous Chang Duoling, who was able to mobilize 3 Dian immortals in a row. The hidden strength of Gong Zijiao was far more terrifying than his demonstrated strength. Right now, this Dayan immortal is in the initial stage, and he has not been promoted to rank 3. But the aura exuding from him is extremely strange, different from blood and hostility, but the purest lifeless aura. It was like a lifeless dead fairy. Qi Zixing changed. This was an immutable truth, so Jian Wushuang raised his sword and greeted him brazenly. This battle must be done quickly. He can't imagine how many troops will be sent crazily to crush the six-day realm, if all the fairy formations on the back of the 4-arm oxen are opened. Once the fairy array is fully opened, it can be imagined that the six-day realm will inevitably be shattered. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4896. The black-robed Yanxian with a face resembling a skull looked at Jian Wushuang, who was approaching him with the sword, with his dark red eyes. It is ridiculous that a little Yanxian wants to fight against Dayanxian in a delusion, and he is overpowered. I said 3 times. If you wait to retreat, I will wait for a way out. If you insist on going forward, just stay here. He said coldly. 1. Without waiting for him to blurt out, a Jetian sword light directly slashed down at him. The sword light rose by 1,000,000 feet against the storm, and swallowed it in a flash. Hypo Dayan's complexion changed, and he hurriedly stretched out his thin palm to release his strength to offset it. Jian Wushuang, the instigator, also came quietly at this time, raised the invisible sword in his hand, and severely cut it down again. Junior, you are overpowering. He was furious, and suddenly waved his robe, trying to squeeze Jian Wushuang with pressure. But he obviously underestimated Jian Wushuang's strength, and the coercion of Hypo Dayanxian did not deter him at all. Jian Wushuang cut off with a single sword, and directly cut off the sleeve of his robes, and then a large bone-like arm was exposed. Seeing that the situation was wrong, Hypo Dayanxian fiercely backed away 100 zhang, looked at his broken sleeves, and looked at Jian Wushuang with a grim look. He seemed to remember something. A pair of dark red eyes suddenly condensed, and his voice raised. You are the fairy who is rumored to behead Chang Duoling? So what if you leave now? I can let you go. Jian Wushuang said. It's ridiculous. Regardless of whether Chang Duoling falls into your hand or not, based on the current situation, can you be a little Yanxian who can stop you? Hypo Dayanxian said coldly. Then Chang Duoling in front of this seat. There is also an influential existence. Even if you really kill him, it will not prove anything. Listen to the advice of this seat. You can leave or return to my sect. You can save your life. Jian Wushuang was already a little impatient. His palm was horizontal, and the invisible sword was aimed directly at him, obviously not planning to talk nonsense with him anymore. A star-shaped sword intent cut straight out, illuminating the entire shattered void. Hypo Dayan was even more surprised. Although he doubted Jian Wushuang's killing of Chang Duoling, it did not mean that he underestimated the enemy. So at this moment, he is also fully responding. Immediately, countless strands of lifelike breath floating up from the abyss of the deep, surging from under his black robe, turned into a 10-meter-sized skull head, opened a huge mouth, swallowing that sword. When the two collided, the most violent blast exploded, and even the Yanxian who wanted to get close was blown away by the blast. Jian Wushuang stood in place, frowning slightly. He could feel the sword, and did not cause any substantial damage to it. Sure enough, when the smoke and dust from the sacrificial explosion dissipated, Hypo Dayan's figure was intact, and even his breath did not decay, but the skull, which was completely condensed by death, was cut to pieces. Sure enough, there are 2 strokes, but these 2 strokes are not enough to keep you alive. I will never let you die today. Hypo Dayan's voice was gloomy. After saying this sentence, his entire figure suddenly grew by several feet, like a thin, withered bone, an endless darkness and death madly overflowing. The whole broken void seemed to boil, becoming more dim and chaotic. Chen Qing looked solemn on the side. Brother Sword, this guy seems to be playing his trump card. Jian Wushuang didn't speak, but reached out his hand to push Chen Qing beside him thousands of feet away from this area. Brother Sword dash, he looked at the black-robed Dayan immortal. At this moment, only 2 figures of them remained in this area. The void under his feet has been covered by the viscous and substantive death air, and even the void surrounding his body has been covered. Jian Wushuang was in this lifeless formation. Although his eyes were serious, he was not afraid. And the reason for not being afraid is because after comprehending the sword intent of the word lake, it is actually a watershed. After that, all his sword intent, all immortal styles, and even ancestral skills, all sublimated to another level. It can be said that Wushuang Kendo and Xinggehuhai sword intent are a kind of comprehension and sublimation. Jian Wushuang is no longer the previous Jian Wushuang, but has the strength to fight Dianxian. That's why he insisted on fighting Chang dueling at the beginning. Only that battle was able to transform him. Fortunately, he also succeeded. Facing Dianxian again, he was somewhat calm, but he also knew his shortcomings. I am afraid that if you want to kill Dayan Immortal again, you can only use the sword intent of the lake character. However, the consumption of the lake-style sword intent is too great. I am afraid that after using this sword intent, he will no longer have the power to fight. Therefore, the lake-style sword intent can only be used when it is most urgent. In this lifeless formation, the black-robed Dayan Immortal seemed to have become the only master, and all the lifelessness became his extended arms. 2 dark red lights shot out from his shriveled eye sockets. Junior, become my nourishment today. With a cold snort, Jian Wushuang held the sword with one hand and looked at him disdainfully. If you are bold enough, come down and fight. Rugged man, I like to the bones and blood of your clumsy man. There is an inexplicable smell that makes me tremble. Hei Pao Dayan Xinjie smiled strangely. The scepter in his palm did not know when it became I wrote a brush dipped in black ink. Then he raised his hands high. Blood battle is the most stupid method. This seat never disdains to use it. This seat controls the heavens, and plays with the laws of the heavens in applause, let alone you juniors. In this dead heavenly immortal formation, this seat is above the realm of heaven. It is just a thought to make you die miserably. Now you can obediently become the nourishment for this seat. Jian Wushuang felt a little unnatural when listening to this weird sound with a little excitement. Next, as above the heavenly path, this seat will be judged against you. Sentence you to wait for the immortal body to age, from life to death, irreversible. With the death penalty of Hypo Dayan Immortal, his domain began to distort and fluctuate in this entire dead heaven immortal formation. Jian Wushuang only felt that an indescribable feeling grew from the bottom of his heart, and at the same time a more mysterious and terrifying scene appeared. Chapter 4897. You know, the immortal body is transformed from the super-perfect chaotic life physique. It can be said that as long as Jian Wushuang is not eager to die, even the emperor cannot completely kill him. But right now, the immortal body is aging at an irreversible speed under the hands of a little-known Dayan Immortal. Aging is a precursor to death. Jian Wushuang could clearly feel that his life was also fading at an extremely fast speed. The feeling that life is allowed to be played around by others is too weird and terrifying. Even he can no longer remain indifferent. Not only did the immortal body begin to age, but also the derivation power in the meridians began to dry up. And these are irreversible. Jian Wushuang wanted to break the shackles, but he found that the invisible sword in his hand was dimmed and eventually shattered. He wanted to release the immortal style, but he was shocked that the strength of the meridians had been weakened to the extreme, and he couldn't support him at all. Even the Bo Yang bottle on his waist could not be held. It was only a few dozen breaths of time since the death penalty came. Jian Wushuang was already aging to an awkward level. Although his figure was still straight, he had already faded away. As if being taken ashore from drowning, he began to gasp. Hypo Dayan Immortal seemed extremely excited when he saw this scene. Junior, feel relieved to be the nourishment for this seat. Chen Qing, who saw this scene from a distance, trembled in his heart, and he hurriedly flew over. Facing this deadly immortal formation, he hit with all his strength, and he could not even cause serious damage to it. Brother Sword, you must hold on. Chen Qing roared anxiously, and then turned to move the rescuers. But then, nearly 30 Yinxian quietly surrounded him from all directions, and the fiercest battle broke out. The big sun formed by a round of black and white is rising slowly, and along with the rising of this big sun, a little emperor who is extremely isolated, and with one sword appears. Holding a real sword in his hand, a sword will encircle Chen Qing's digital fairy and fly away, and at the same time resolutely join the battle. Bloody Chen Qing said in surprise, "His Royal Highness, why are you here?" "I won't come, won't you die here?" Xiaodijin said in a congealed voice. The 30-odd Yinxian who had originally surrounded them quickly disappeared under the battle between the two of them. There are almost two kinds of immortality, who have mastered the fairy style, and those who have not mastered the immortal style. And the Xianxian mastering the immortal style is extremely rare. So at this moment, although there are only two people, Xiao Dijuan and Chen Qing, they almost crushed the past with little effort. More than 30 Yinxian quickly escaped. After the last sword shattered an immortal source, Xiao Dijuan rushed to the dead heaven immortal formation without stopping. When he saw Jian Wushuang in the formation, his brows trembled slightly when he was aging irreversibly. "Little Emperor, I have tried this immortal formation. It can't be broken at all." Chen Qing wiped off the blood on his face and said nervously, "I am afraid that everyone except the one who has been with Brother Jian can't be broken." Xiaodijin then said, "You immediately invite him over, saying that Wushuang is trapped, and I'm here to guard." "No, Your Highness, you have to follow me. It's too dangerous here," Chen Qing said anxiously. "Go," he said solemnly, his words full of indisputability. Chen Qing had no choice but to leave quickly. Then Xiaodijin drew out his soft sword and stabbed at the dead heaven immortal formation before him fiercely. But the fairy formation remained motionless, seemingly unharmed at all. However, Xiao Dijuan seemed to be unaware of this scene. He just pierced the immortal formation with one sword after another, trying to open a gap. At the same time, Jian Wushuang had already aged to the extreme in the dead sky array, and his fairy body was already covered with cracks. The black-robed Dian immortal Jejie smiled strangely, and then landed in the air, slowly coming to Jian Wufang. "Junior, this is your price for provoking this seat." As he spoke, he slowly stretched out his well-knotted palm, and separated the black robe from the middle, exposing the contents. Under the black robe, it was not a full fairy body, but a pale skeleton without any flesh and blood. And there were countless dead spirits crisscrossing his skeleton, as well as pieces of nail-sized shiny stones. Immediately, Hypodian Immortal reached out and took out a shining stone from his arms, and gradually approached Jian Wushuang. Longzhong Jian Wushuang, who was already old-fashioned at this moment, the chaotic eyes returned to sharpness, like the sharpest and unparalleled real sword. Just as the Shenfeng came to the world, the unmatched gaze directly forced it back. "No, how could it be possible? Haven't you already let this seat be sentenced to death?" Hei Pao Dian was shocked beyond words. Hua Fa came back to life. All the oldness on the fairy body disappeared in a flash, and he became the appearance of that handsome young man again. The hair like a black waterfall is surging with incomparable patterns, which set him off like a god. He smiled contemptuously. "You are good at being a god. Although you can play with the of applause, you will never be worthy of being a god. What's more, even the laws of the gods can no longer leave any traces on me. It depends on you." As Jian Wushuang said, he walked forward step by step, while Hypodianxian stepped back, his eyes constantly changing. "Do you think you can derive the law of heaven from your dead sky array, so you will use it for me again? Stupid! Are you arrogantly claiming to be above heaven?" Time seemed to freeze, and Hypodian was shocked that he suddenly couldn't move, as if he was suppressed by another, more ancient way of heaven, preventing him from moving a bit. Then, Jian Wushuang stretched out his palm and held his neck tightly. "I will let you take a good look, who is above the heaven." The death sky array began to shatter uncontrollably, and the trenches and cracks filled the barrier. At the same time, a kind of more ancient and profound heavenly power is coming. The death sky array that can derive heaven's Tao suddenly shattered. No, I was wrong, let me go, I no longer dare to speak God's way. I no longer dare to speak falsely. Hypodian immortal, suppressed by that special energy, could not move. A long-lost breath of death made him horrified and trembling. He had never felt that the true death was so close to him. He also believed the fact that the young man in front of him had become an immortal, beheading the 9 heavens immortal monarch Chang Duoling. Chapter 4898. Jian Wushuang slowly shook his head and said softly, "It's a pity that I don't want to be above the realm of heaven." In the next moment, he suddenly blasted out hundreds of millions of pure Yanli Huamang from the palms he clenched, and directly wrapped it to the black-robed Dian Immortal. He didn't even make any sound. The entire skeleton fairy was directly swallowed by Huamang, and then suddenly turned into a fan. Dian Immortal, the initial stage of a generation, died in Jian Wushuang's hands in this way, without any suspense. Retracting his palm, Jian Wushuang let out a sigh. It seems that everything that happened to the other party still has lingering fears. He is almost certain that if he is not an immortal body, then this time he will inevitably die. The means to be able to derive the way of heaven, and let the way of heaven be one's own use, is really terrible. If it weren't for the immortal body, beyond the limit of the heavenly Tao that the black-robed Dian Immortal could control, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even if it is an ordinary Dian Immortal, I am afraid that if he is not careful, he will break his way and become a dead bone. Putting aside these terror methods, the body of the black-robed Dian Immortal is actually quite weak, almost not on the same level as Chang Duoling before. This is also why Jian Wushuang can easily destroy him after breaking the shackles of his heavenly way. Fortunately, he finally succeeded. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang secretly decided that he would try not to be alone anymore. At the same time, he was even more wary of Dian Immortal. As expected, those who were able to reach Dian Immortal were by no means mediocre. After beheading the black-robed Dian Immortal, Jian Wushuang turned around and saw the little emperor in black uniform. He smiled tiredly and said, "Brother Jian." Jian Wushuang's brows condensed, and he directly stretched out his hand to blast a beam of light at him. The little emperor did not dodge and stood still. A violent beam of Yanli light passed him, blasted behind him, and directly crushed several Yinxian into powder. "Be careful, the war has just begun." Jian Wushuang flew up to him and said condensely. Xiaotajin nodded. "What's the next step?" He didn't speak, but looked at the fairy formation with the first arm ox with a hole in the back. There is already an extremely powerful force blooming. Along with the emergence of Yanli, there is a steady stream of Yinxian coming out of the fairy formation. The battle that was already at a disadvantage, with the opening of the first heaven gate, fell into an extreme disadvantage. Roughly counting, nearly 100 Yinxian joined the battle again, and countless Dingxiu also stepped out of the fairy formation and joined the battle. Just a fairy formation conveyed such a terrifying background, and then 4 fairy formations opened at the same time. I am afraid that this battle will have nearly 1,000 fairy formations fighting. I'm going to destroy the immortal formations. From now on, you will be by Daiking's side. Don't leave even one step. Jian Wushuang asked. However, Xiao Dijuan did not leave, but a soft sword in Yaiheng's hand. It is better to follow you instead of following him. After he finished speaking, he directly lifted his sword and flew towards the arm ox. Jian Wushuang was helpless. Then he slapped on the soles of his feet and rushed directly to the first fairy formation. Not long after they left, the place where the black-robed Dian Immortal had disappeared quietly condensed an uneven phantom. A steady stream of Yinxian and Dingxiu walked out of the immortal formation, then looked at the chaotic void, and quickly joined the battle. In this kind of extremely unequal battle, even if one side has a few more geniuses, it is a decisive victory. If it hadn't been for Daiking's shelter in the rear, the more than 100 Yangxians brought by Gongzikian would have been swallowed. Right now, there are still more than 60 fairy gods miraculously remaining, and the army of gods born with the Armox has suffered heavy casualties, almost losing more than half, leaving only more than 100. But this kind of situation, after opening in the fairy formation hole, and continuously joining Yanxian and Dingxiu, there has been a subtle change. Even Di Qing felt an inexplicable pressure. Almost the entire battlefield of the Six-Day Realm was defeated by him alone. As long as he was defeated, the Six-Day Realm behind him would be swallowed instantly. It has been only a few decades since the second true life fell. The current Di Qing is almost still in a weakening stage, and it is already a bit difficult to resist the offensive of hundreds of immortals. At the same time, he was still worried that the black-robed Dian immortal, who had disappeared without a trace from the beginning, would give him a thunderous blow. But he was still clenching his teeth, and the remaining 60 Yanxians surrounded him, barely able to share some of the offensive. And young Master Qian, who had originally planned to hide, also joined the battle under consideration from all sides, closely following Di Qing's back, barely lying directly on his body. Di Qing's gaze is solemn, looking forward through the broken void. There, a figure with a figure like a sword, carrying endless power, broke through the void and swept towards the first fairy formation. The Armox, which was originally sleeping with closed eyes, seemed to feel threatened, and all 6 huge eyes that looked like big sun opened, looking at the sudden figure. Roar! The sound waves that could shatter the void exploded. Arm Nyo raised that unimaginable head, opened the abyss and swallowed Jian Wushuang. Under this mouth, even the void was dimmed, but Jian Wushuang did not evade, and was swallowed by it resolutely. In the next moment, thousands of magnificent flowers suddenly burst into the huge mouth of Armia's closed abyss. A hint of doubt flashed through its 6 giant eyes, and then they all burst open. Arm Nyo's extremely huge head was also blown away by the most magnificent beam of light. As if the sky had fallen, it couldn't even make a mournful sound, and the whole head became dust in the void. Jian Wushuang glanced back, then moved on. With just one sword, destroyed an Armox that needed more than a dozen immortals to barely restrain it. This was an unimaginable scene. This horrifying scene was caught in the eyes of dozens of immortals, and then they all retreated tacitly, and then joined the chaotic battle. With the soles of his feet resting on Armia's boundless back, Jian Wushuang slowly exhaled a turbid breath. In front of him, there was a steady stream of violent soldiers. In the spring and autumn period, Cui Jing and others were also going to help Jian Wushuang, but he was held back by him. Brother Jian is not too dangerous for the time being. Let's alleviate some pressure on this adult together now. Seeing Di Qing with 10 wings blooming behind him, Chuanxiu didn't say much, and directly called out 8 armed puppets with angry eyes, and guarded Di Qing together. Cui Jing also joined the battle immediately, carrying an 8-foot mysterious stick, and fighting side by side with Chuanxiu. Wei Liujia, who hadn't fully recovered, joined the battle without hesitation. He thought that being able to defend Jian Wushuang on the bottom line of the Six-Day Realm would be regarded as helping Jian Wushuang. Zhao Ting also gritted his teeth slightly, and after a moment of hesitation joined the battle. With Chuanxiu, Cui Jing, and several Yanxian guarding him, Di Qing felt the pressure on his body instantly loosened, and he was able to take a breather. The calmness of spring and autumn, Cui Jing's boldness, Chen Qing's sophisticated and smooth, and Wei Lijia's seemingly gentle but fast and deadly, are all suitable for this chaotic situation. Their matching with each other greatly offset the wave after wave of impact, and even Di Qing secretly affirmed them. And as they joined the battle in the spring and autumn period, thousands of streams emerged from the Six-Day Realm. They are the last remaining immortals and top repairs in the Six-Day Realm. They were all practicing enlightenment in the Luanjian Dojo in the far south of Xiagyushan, but now they are all here, and none of Dingxiu and Yanxian are absent. Stepping into this chaotic battlefield, none of Yanxian and Dingxiu said a word, silently greeting their destiny. In some ways this is indeed a fateful battle. The sword repairs all drew out their true swords, and the top repairs released their most chewy power. Less than 10 Yanxian took the lead to rush into the chaotic battlefield, kill the enemy and be killed. This is the purest war, and it is also the largest war since the establishment of the Great Division. There were nearly 600 immortals, and an innumerable number of top repairers who participated in the war. and immortals continued to join the war. This is also a war between emperors, which includes 5 or even 6 emperors. This war was also a turning point that was completely torn apart between them. The situation that was originally one-sided fell into a stalemate again. This made the pale-faced young Master Qian somewhat relieved, and he was also in shock. Under the seat of the little emperor, Sun Yin, where did these guys who are so powerful that they can even turn the tide of the battle on their own come from? Naturally, no one can answer Gong Ziqian. If you want to let him know that these guys who can turn the tide don't even obey the orders of Xiao Dijuan, I am afraid he will be completely shocked again. To restore the originally decadent situation again, the chaotic battle is even more chaotic than before. Chapter 4900. Dead Fairyland Pile of Bones. Yanxian Melee, Top Repair Deadly Battle. Looking around, the broken void is full of celestial bones. And this situation will only intensify, and will not end, because at the source of the war, only one of the 4 fairy formations was destroyed. There are also 3 fairy formations, which are about to open and enter the stage of violent soldiers. Once the remaining 3 teleportation fairy formations are opened, everything will enter an irreversible road. So Jian Wushuang would never let that scene appear. After destroying the first fairy formation, he immediately rushed to the second fairy formation. He wants to contain this battle from the source. Now the whole situation is under the protection of Di Qing, barely in a stalemate state. But this state will not last long, so Jian Wushuang has to fight quickly, and then return to defense. With nearly 10,000 fairy patterns suddenly turning, the second fairy formation and the third fairy formation are about to open. Jian Wushuang's figure has quietly arrived in front of the second armyu, holding an invisible sword. His whole figure is like the same Wushuang divine sword, and he slashes towards the giant head of armyu without fear. Because the arm cow's body is too huge, even several times larger than some ordinary heavens, this also caused its slow movement, and if it encounters a strong enemy, it is basically waiting to die. Facing Jian Wushuang, this second armox also opened a huge mouth in the abyss, and swallowed it into its belly. The same scene was staged again. The billions of magnificent Huamang exploded arm Nyo's head, and finally turned its entire head into powder. Jian Wushuang reached the top with his sword, and looked at the huge immortal formation on Armius' back, which had been completely opened. Already, the formation of Yanxian has begun to step out of the fairy formation, and rush to the battlefield. But in just a few dozen breaths of time, in the broken void battlefield, more than 100 immortals were added again. And there is a steady stream of immortals coming out of the teleporting immortal array. The 6-day realm is in danger. Originally there were more than 300 immortal soldiers on the battlefield, and with the addition of fresh blood, they were approaching 500. Jian Wushuang was holding an invisible sword, and he came to the second fairy formation in a flash. He wanted to close the fairy formation in the shortest possible time. Only this time, it was not as smooth as the first time. Almost at the same time, Yanxian, who was constantly walking out of the immortal formation, became vigilant for an instant and surrounded Jian Wushuang. "Are you the remnant of the 6 heavens realm?" A clear voice sounded, followed by a young Yanxian, wearing bright silver Qinya silver armor, and holding a Jiangsu silver gun, walking out of the immortal formation, looking at Jian Wushuang proudly. Jian Wushuang glanced at him obliquely, and directly used the 7th formula of Luyan grass sword style. The grass leaves turn green. Suddenly, the infinite sword intent rushed out from the blade, like a green grass leaf flying forward. The young man Yanxian's eyes lit up, and his competitive heart suddenly rose. He took a sudden step forward, pointing Zhang Zu's silver spear directly at the void, then put his palm against the spear body, and used a straightforward. This seemingly unremarkable thorn, but carrying the momentum of the whale swallowing Tianhe, broke through Jian Wushuang's Luyan grass sword style. At this moment, even Xiao Dijuan, who was standing beside Jian Wushuang, was shocked to the extreme. This was the first time that there was an immortal in the same realm, and Jian Wushuang's sword intent was broken from the front, without much effort. Jian Wushuang was also slightly surprised. Chapter 49:01. Even Jian Wushuang saw this scene, his brows jumped. This was a full blow from dozens of immortals, and countless offensives from the top repairers. All fell on him. Even if it was an alien beast known for its physical hardness, it could not be supported. But the next moment a shocking scene appeared. Fengshan suddenly yelled. His sturdy figure like a peak doubled suddenly, and at the same time, the thick blue veins of his arm rose up, and his skin turned dark blue. All Yanxian and Dingxia's offensives seemed to have failed, and they didn't even leave any traces on him. Big sir, hurry up. He looked back at Jian Wushuang and roared, already doing his best. Jian Wushuang didn't say much. The invisible sword in his hand was shining to the extreme. Wushuang Kendo, Zingehohe Jianyini the second style. River. As if hanging down from the void dome, with endless sword intent. Every sword intent reflected the bright stars, and then swept through. Under this sword, there were nearly 1,000 top repairers. More than 30 Yanxian were strangled on the spot, and countless people were hit hard. Fengshan was stunned and watched this scene in disbelief. The encirclement was also completely disrupted. Live well. After Jian Wushuang said such a word to Fengshan, he stood directly in front of the immortal formation, where the fairy patterns flowed. In the immortal formation, there was a steady stream of Yanxian and Dingxiu emerging, but they were all kicked back by Jian Wushuang. And then he stretched out his hand to release the immortal pose. After the battle with Chang dueling, all of Jian Wushuang's ancestral arts, immortal style, and kendo were tempered. Therefore, the immortal style he released at this moment is more majestic and vast than before. Xian style, a little mountain and river. With Jian Wushuang as the center, hundreds of thousands of miles of void in his whole body have become his domain, in which he can mobilize and transform any matter. A sacred peak directly shattered the void, pressed down, and directly crushed the suppression of the second fairy formation. So far, only 2 of the 4 fairy formations are left. The immortal formation collapsed, and the infinite strength and radiance scattered all over. This scene was caught by nearly 100 immortals, and then they all rushed towards Jian Wushuang like they were crazy. Fengshan grinned in pain. Dogs, you want to run after hitting Grandpa? Jian Wushuang didn't stop. After destroying the second fairy formation, he went straight to the third fairy formation. Seeing this, the young man Yanxian who was fighting against the little emperor directly shot the little emperor back, and his figure instantly chased in the direction of Jian Wushuang. But then, a sacred mountain-like figure blocked their way. If you want to catch up, just step over from the master. Fengshan's eyes were also extremely arrogant, and said disdainfully. The young man Yanxian raised his brows, and pointed his silver spear at him. Step over him for me. Rumble. Nearly 100 immortals, and countless Dingxiu Ma Pingchuan stepped over. Looking at Fengshan deeply embedded in the back of the arm oxen, the young man Yanxian shook his head. What a strange request. The third fairy formation has been opened, and while tens of thousands of immortal patterns are circulating, one by one immortal comes out of it. Now there are only 2 of the immortal formations destroyed by Jian Wushuang, and the chaotic battlefield has also begun to stalemate. He came to the third arm ox in an instant. This time he did not kill the arm ox, but jumped straight to the third fairy formation. Just as he was about to slash down with the sword, there was a sudden piercing sound behind him. Jian Wushuang was forced to turn his head and resist. Young Yanxian's Jiangsu silver spear then pierced it, and the extremely violent Yanli exploded. Chapter 49:02. Even though what he said is true and invincible in the same realm, there is no possibility of winning against Jian Wushuang. Before the beginning of this battle, Jian Wushuang was enough to fight the third-ranked Dian Immortal, and the 9 Heavens Immortal Monarch often made orders. In other words, they are no longer equal opponents. Jian Wushuang is sure to defeat them within the 2 swords. Why don't you believe what the seat says? Young Yanxian raised his brows and asked coldly. Of course I believe that if it is on weekdays, I might still compete with you, but not now. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and said, then turned around. Fengshan tilted his head and spat, and the fairy body doubled. Upon seeing this, the young man Yinxian became angry. Dare to ignore this seat? The next moment, he held the gun directly and flew straight to Jian Wushuang's heart. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, and just as he was about to give him a thunderous blow, an extremely strange aura suddenly appeared. Because that breath appeared too fast, it was almost impossible for Jian Wushuang to react, and appeared on his back. Jie guy, you can't escape this time. That weird aura condensed into a black robe figure. It was huge, 2 black lights burst out from its eye sockets, and death aura rose to the sky. Jian Wushuang's eyes condensed. This black robe figure was exactly the black robe Dian immortal he had killed before. But at this moment he actually appeared again. The black robe Dian immortal seemed to have not suffered any severe damage, and 2 huge bone palms stretched out from under the black robe, directly grasping Jian Wushuang, and then dragging it directly into the fairy formation. Because everything that happened was so fast, even when Jian Wushuang reacted, he was already dragged into the fairy formation. Fengshan also reacted instantly, and went straight to the fairy formation. Courageous, the young man Yinxian was furious, and then moved forward with his gun, and plunged into the fairy formation. The immortal patterns flowed impressively, but they absorbed their figures in an instant, without knowing where to transmit them. The chaos on the battlefield remained, but Yinxian did not notice this change. With the complete opening of the 3rd and 4th fairy formations, the entire void battlefield has completely entered the most tragic and grand stage. Immortals continue to come out of the last 2 immortal formations to join the battle, and only 1 immortal formation can make more than 300 immortals. So far, nearly 1,000 Yinxian rushed to the 6-day realm, standing on the back of the dead Armox. Xiao Dijuan holding a long sword, staring at this scene. The void gangfoam violently tore everything. The complete destruction of the 6-day realm is a foregone conclusion. As the fairy patterns in the fairy formation flowed, it seemed that a long time passed, and it seemed that only a moment later, Jian Wushuang was teleported to a heaven. The weird black robe Dian immortal holding him has long since disappeared, as if he had never appeared before. The soles of the feet fall firmly on the ground, and when you look into the eyes, the dead grass and the dry river area are the main colors of this heaven. The sky was incomparably chaotic, and the dead energy was so thick that it even covered and swallowed the escaped power. Standing under the sky, an extremely strange and inexplicable atmosphere was quietly permeating. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to leave to check, Fengshan's huge figure fell from the sky, and fell directly to the ground, and a dog came to chew on mud. Ouch! Fengshan wailed, rubbing his head, and got up from the ground. Immediately afterwards, another fairy wearing silver armor and holding a silver spear descended from the sky, with an air of arrogance and doubt. Where is this place? Jian Wushuang glanced at him, but didn't plan to do anything. To come to such a strange and inexplicable place, it is imperative to thoroughly investigate it. Fengshan then said, My lord, this won't be the nest of the guy who dragged you here. It's very likely. He nodded, then looked into the distance. Pieces of dead lion grass connected directly to the sky. On the cracked and dilapidated earth, there were so many huge graves, almost uncountable. There were even many dark and shabby coffins standing diagonally on the ground, which exudes. The pale white spirit banners fluttered and rustled with the violent wind, which was indescribably desolate and strange. Under this investigation, Jian Wushuang inexplicably felt that this weird and inexplicable universe was extremely similar to a place in his memory. That place is the Refining God sect in the Void Universe, which is where he is undercover. Shenzong refining the corpse is used as a combat puppet. As long as the disciple of the sect can refine any corpse, it is much stronger than the Void in the same realm. It is precisely because of this that the Divine Refining sect is in the entire Void. The universe can be regarded as a super sect. And right now, in this desolate, dilapidated and strange heaven, the death aura contained in it was even 100 times, or even 1,000 times thicker than the star field of Refining God sect. So much so that Jian Wushuang began to wonder whether there was a wicked and evil sect in this heavenly domain similar to that of the refining god sect. Just when there was no clue, a strange laugh was completely resounded in the entire heavenly plane. Yes, yes. I thought it would be a great opportunity to swallow one, but now I send 2 of them to the door, and this seat will reluctantly swallow all of you. With the sound resounding, a huge face of billions of feet gradually appeared above the originally chaotic void. This huge face is like a skin tightened on a skull, with a pointed mouth and bulging cheeks, alive and ugly like a hairless monkey. Despite the great change in face, Jian Wushuang recognized this huge face at a glance, the black-robed Dayan immortal who died under his hands. The young man Yanxian on the side frowned when he saw this scene, and then he shouted loudly, "Yuyan, if you don't go to the 6-day realm for a battle, now what do you return to your own heaven?" Above the sky, the huge face condensed, and then seeing this scene, I couldn't help showing a smile. Who am I? It turned out to be the great heaven official of Shuyang. How about it? Are you satisfied with my heaven? Youth Yanxian frowned slightly. Stop talking nonsense, and quickly follow me to the 6-day realm. No problem, but you always have to eat before you can work, right? The huge face showed a strange and inexplicable smile. He suddenly raised the silver spear in his hand. Yun, what do you mean? It's not interesting. Chapter 4903. The young man Yanxian, who was called Shuyang, his eyes suddenly sank. Yun, you are looking for death. In the next moment, the true soul of the silver spear, condensed from the purest derivation power, emerged from the back of the sun, reaching a height of 10 million feet. When those chains were tied down, the most magnificent brilliance suddenly burst out. When the two collided, a huge force that shook the sky and the earth completely agitated, making the chaotic sky unbearable and shattered. The true soul of the silver spear instantly shredded the infinite chains that had been entangled, and went straight to the huge face without any reduction. Chirp! Like a hot knife cutting butter, the real soul of the silver gun completely crushed the huge face and turned it into powder. Small bugs. Xu Yang snorted coldly, not afraid, as if he didn't put the black-robed Dayan immortal in his eyes. Jie, stay here. The sky collapsed, and a black-robed figure appeared quietly. His arms slowly opened, and endless death came out from under his black robe. Here, I am the only way of heaven. Any immortal who tries to break the will receive the most severe punishment. With him as the center, the thick and deadly aura transformed into an enchantment, besieging Jian Wushuang, Fengshan, and Shuyang. Damn the dog! How dare you take this seat at the moment of the war? Shuyang gritted his teeth. Sir, shall we rush out? Fengshan asked Jian Wushuang, who was beside him, obviously also a little nervous. Jian Wushuang didn't speak, and in the midst of this big array, he smelled something unusual. The black-robed Dayan immortal that was supposed to be beheaded by him survived, without knowing what secret method he used, and relying on this weird heaven, rearranged a dead heaven array to completely trap them. Just as he said, in this dead day formation, he is the only way of heaven. Trying to trap a few immortals to death is just the simplest thing. But he far underestimated the variables, and this variable is Jian Wushuang. He was able to kill rank 3 Dayan immortal with his own power. Facing this weakest Dayan immortal, Jian Wushuang had a big chance of winning, even if the current situation was extremely unfavorable for him. Shuyang's complexion was ugly, and he naturally realized the troubles of Yuyan, and it would be difficult to escape from here. Just when he was about to let go of his life, Jian Wushuang moved. He didn't release Wushuang's swordsmanship, nor did he release ancestral skills. He just stepped forward peacefully. Standing right in the center of this dead heaven immortal formation, Hypo Dayan immortal stepped back unconsciously when he saw this. The red light in his eyes dodged somewhat. He has an inexplicable sense of fear and crisis for this young man, who gave him a thunderous blow earlier. If it hadn't been for a life-saving secret to escape a catastrophe, he would have been completely destroyed now. I can kill you the first time, and naturally I can kill you the second time. Let us leave now. I promise to let you go. Jian Wushuang's calm voice resounded. and he came to Hypodianxian, no more than 10 feet between the two. Otherwise, Chang Dueling's end is your end. His voice was not loud, but it exploded in Xu Yang's mind. A fairy dared to threaten a fairy face to face? And there is no fear? Is this his illusion or is it real? Are you threatening me? Hypodianxian looked at him warily, and said in a low voice. Not a threat but a warning. Jian Wushuang said, and an invisible sword condensed in his palm. Hypodian swiftly retreated, and his ferocious voice resounded from his mouth. When you enter my heavenly realm, don't even want to leave, I'll become the nourishment for this seat. Ming stubborn. Jian Wushuang shook his head, and then he stretched out his hand a little, and a Tianhe derives out of the dead heaven immortal formation without any signs, and swept directly towards the black-robed Dian immortal. Xian style, a little mountain and river. Seeing this mysterious scene, black-robed Dian was shocked and hurried away. The Tianhe swept across, almost instantly tore a crack in the dead heavenly immortal array, and swept forward without any reduction. Why are you still stunned? Let's help together, can't you be trapped here? Feng Shan drank, and then he soared. Xu Yang, who had recovered from the shock, his eyes sharpened again. Facing the black-robed Dian immortal who had fled hurriedly, he exploded with a thunderous blow. The celestial death formation, which was originally not very strong, shattered directly, and the inexplicable completely disappeared. Hypodianxian's figure had long been scattered in the void, but his voice came over immediately. Damn fellows, prepare to accept the devouring of the dead fairy under my seat. As his voice fell, the originally dry and silent earth began to rumbling and trembling. The dead air thick as ink also spurted from the cracks in the earth. The huge tomb burst, the coffin shattered, and a series of figures, almost condensed from death, walked out of the ground, and then all soared above the sky. That every figure surrounded by death qi is all immortal. However, they are very different from the ordinary Yanxian. Their whole body exudes lifelessness. Their eyes are blood red, and the exposed immortal body is covered by the dark red meridians of the thickness of the fingers, which is to the extreme. Seeing this scene, Xu Yang, holding a silver gun, gritted his teeth and said, "This Yuyan is really evil. Why do you know him?" Feng Shan on the side looked at him and asked. Because he was on the same front for the time being, Jian Wushuang was not afraid that he would suddenly violently hurt people. Xu Yang took a deep breath and said, I also heard a little bit earlier that Yuyan is a notorious evil immortal in this heaven. It uses the origin of Dingxiu, and even the immortal to strengthen its own strength, and transform them into slaves for their own drive. Now it seems he is really as bad as the rumors. Shuiyang's words were true, and did not seem to be false. Jian Wushuang himself had somewhat guessed some of the activities done by the black-robed Dian immortal. The death aura is so strong, it is absolutely inseparable from the origin of Dingxiu and the origin of Yanxian. For example, at the moment, the nearly 30 eternal immortals encircled from all sides have all annihilated the immortal source, only driven by death. Next, I'm going to pay attention. I heard that the servants under Yuyan's seat can absorb all attacks, even the source of immortality. Once they are entangled by them, it's not that interesting anymore. If you don't want to be like them, servant, do your best to break through here. Xu Yang reminded him, he looked like a big enemy. However, Jian Wushuang didn't worry at all, because he knew how to deal with this kind of method that could devour foreign objects to strengthen himself. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.